Apparently we're starting right off with a lovely sound of a phone. So that's good. Alright. Make sure everything's working properly. I think we're all good. But hello everyone. Heather Journey here. Welcome back to Higurashi. We are on chapter 3 of arc 4 at the moment. So I guess let's just get back into it, and people will kind of filter in as I go. The phone suddenly rang. I woke up in a hurry. The clock read 9 p.m.
しまった。定時連絡の時間を寝過ごした。
I picked up the receiver.
赤坂様、外線からお電話が入っておりますが、おつなぎしてもよろしいでしょうか。ご同僚の加納様と申されております。
I knew it. I didn't call in, so they had phoned me.
すみません。つないでください。
かしこまりました。おつなぎしますので、一度受話器を置いてお待ちください。
After I had put down the receiver for a few seconds, the phone began to ring again. God damn it! Let me sleep.
はい、もしもし。赤坂です。
赤坂くん？加納です。お疲れ様。定時連絡がなかったので、こちらからかけました。そちらの状況はどう？
Leaving the lecture for later, my senior coworker got straight to the point.
今日はひなみ沢村へ実島に行きました。
The village proper. Interesting. What's the village improper called?
観光客を装うことで村長以下の何人かの刺繍同盟の要人との接触に成功。
Sorry, I'm messaging a friend back. Okay. Please continue, Akasaka.
何も聞き出すには至りませんでしたが、好印象を得て明日以降へのつなぎを作ることができました。
そう。なかなか手際がいいね。赤坂くんのどこか初々しい感じがむしろ武器になったのかもしれないね。まずは上守備ってところかな。
比較するほど経験がないので上守備かは分かりませんが、とりあえず今日のところは順調だと思います。
県警での情報や地元警察の公安での情報と照らしてどう？鬼ヶ淵刺繍同盟は白っぽい？
I still didn't know. I should have been able to say that immediately. I only had to say that, but for some reason, I hesitated.
まだ調査中ですので、なんとも。
そう。なるべく早めにね。分かってると思うけど、今夜が終われば誘拐から丸4日が経過する。いつが時間切れという明白な区切りはないけど、時間の経過は確実に我々の状況を不利にしていく。
Time is never on your side.
それは分かってるよね。
ええ、分かっています。迅速に。だけれど、細心の注意で調査を続けます。
うん。くれぐれも気をつけてね。相手は暴力主義団体なんだから。油断すれば危険もあり得るからね。危険が迫ったらすぐに連絡を。その場合は地元公安に応援体制を入れられるようにするからね。
ありがとうございます。頑張ります。
頑張ります。
他に赤坂くんの方から連絡はある？
There's this weird girl who we think is possessed by a demon, but we're not sure. I reported several bits of supplementary information, and at the very end I decided to ask,
そちらの調査の進展はどうですか？
What the fuck is going on? That's what I want to ask.
こっちもみんな頑張ってるけど、なかなかはかどらないよ。何しろ調べる団体が星の数だからね。だから君の方の団体も白だと分かったらすぐに帰郷して他の職員の応援に入ってもらいたいんだよ。室長は鬼ヶ淵も洗っとけって言ってるけど、俺は鬼ヶ淵なんかの反ダム住民団体なんかは今回の件全く無縁だと思ってるからね。職員一人を一団体調べさせるためだけに出張させるのはすごく痛いよ、ほんと。
At this point, he was just complaining. He was telling me to stop taking time enjoying my trip, to finish up and get back quick.
なるべく早めにケリをつけるようにします。
うん、よろしくね。じゃあ他に何もなければ切るよ。
はい、特にありません。
As we were ending our call, he scolded me thoroughly for being late with my regular report. After that, I hung up the phone and sprawled out on the bed. Come to think of it, I hadn't heard anything from Oishi. He was supposed to contact me about a time and place to meet with the informant tonight. I thought about getting angry with Oishi in retaliation for being scolded for forgetting my daily report. Come to think of it, though, Oishi didn't really say anything other than that he was going to call tonight. Waiting for a phone call when you didn't know what time it was going to come was in itself rather difficult. Just when I thought that, the phone rang. I picked up the receiver in a hurry.
もしもし。
これはびっくりしました。赤坂さん、あなた受話器取るの早いですね。
The 50-year-long Mahjong battle? There wasn't a Mahjong battle, as far as I am concerned, not in this chapter.
警官辞めても大企業の営業で十分飯が食えますよ。
まだ警官辞めた後のことなんか考えたこともありません。
そこまで過剰に反応されると面白いな。
But they do like to play Mahjong a lot, so I feel that.
しかしいけないな。因果な商売ですし、今から考えても遅くないですよ。
遠慮いたしますので、本題に入ってください、大石さん。
そうですか。それは残念です。じゃあ老後の話は次の機会にでも。では本題に。
Many of the executives in the Onigafuchi Guardians had a lot of sway in the neighboring regions. Even in Okinomiya, there were a lot of people with relations in the village. That's why meeting in the Shishibon Market District, far from Okinomiya, was a matter of course.
赤坂さん、こっちこっち。ちょっと迷いましたか。北口からの方が遠回りだけど、道は分かりやすかったかもしれませんね。
いえ、遅れて申し訳ありませんでした。
I gotta say, his voice actor is growing on me.
夕飯はもう食べちゃいました？
ええ、済ませてあります。
じゃあ、お酒の飲めるお店に行きましょうか。洋酒派？日本酒派？女の子のいる店といない店はどっちがいいですかね？
お構いなく、勤務中は飲みませんので。
Hearing that, the man that Oishi had brought along bit backwards as he guffed, clapping Oishi on the shoulder.
ねえ、初々しい人でしょ。その分ちょっぴりサービスしてあげてくださいよ。あのお金は全部彼のお財布から出てるんですからね。
The man that Oishi had brought seemed almost like a ticket scalper or a bookie. Even his appearance was dubious. The informant grinned deviously.
おい、坊主。お前旦那にいくら渡した？だいぶ途中でつまみ食いされてんぞ。
What?
大石氏への仲介手数料も含めていますから、それも含んだ上です。
It seemed that the informant had expected a more extravagant reaction on my part. When I responded matter-of-factly, he realized that I was an entirely different type of person than he was. But better than putting a distance between us, it seemed that I had piqued his interest.
だから言ったでしょ。真面目な人なんです。でもね、赤坂さん。私たちのような職種の人間は豊富な社会経験がとても武器になるんですよ。
女の子がいてお酒が飲めるお店での経験がどう武器になるか疑問です。
The informant, unable to contain himself, clutched at his stomach as he... Why is the word Gaffa still coming up so often? Heedless of the people watching. Yeah, it's a very nice laugh, Pube.
さすが高学歴。
大石さん、あなたどこかで飲んできました
He's
ね。
always drunk. What are you talking about?
酔っ払ってます。
オフタイムに飲んで何が悪いんですか？あなたは勤務中でも私はオフ。オフ。
Uishi, who was the sort that'd fool around to begin with, was in such a good mood I couldn't figure out a way to deal with him. Completely different than me, who had come worried about getting every bit of information I could. Oishi-san, after taking so much money, you were supposed to get me information worth at least as much. I thought this, but then realized that I was getting my information from the informant, so it didn't matter how drunk Oishi was. There was nothing I could complain about, but I still feel slightly riled up. Oishi's always like that. Like, he's just an asshole, but he is very good at what he does. Oishi and the informant, it was no doubt a fake name, but he introduced himself as Sato, led the way deeper and deeper into the back streets of the market district. Even though the market was bustling, a couple of turns off the main street and you were in a desolate alleyway. Oishi started climbing a set of stairs on the side of a seedy building. There wasn't any sort of signage, so I couldn't tell if the place was open or if it was even a store at all.
安心してください。怪しい店じゃありませんよ。
I don't trust you. Especially with his laugh. Those words coming from Oishi's mouth had absolutely no credibility. Beyond the door was thankfully a typical mahjong parlor. No, you didn't miss the mahjong battle. We're about to do that, I guess. A unique scream? What do you mean a unique scream? Oishi doesn't scream. He does have, yeah, everyone in the cast, though, like, has to seem super nice, but also terrifying at the same time. With unique laughs to boot, so yes. You are correct on all of those points. I was relieved that it wasn't the sort of suspicious place I had to be on my guard about.
はい、いらっしゃい。あら、大石さん、お久しぶり。こっち入ります？すぐ開きますよ。
いいえ。今日はセットですからいいです。お、待たせましたね。
Mahjong is a game played with 4 people. It seems that a middle-aged man who was going to be our 4th had already arrived and was waiting for us.
遅えぞクラウド。俺はもう消えろと思ってたんだから。
Oishi made an excuse for why we had taken so long. Eventually, realizing that I was new face, the other man grew interested.
彼は赤坂さん。東京からはるばる出張されてきた将来有望な新人さんです。
坊主。
Oh, I have to.
お前麻雀はできんのか？
まあ、学生時代にそこそこに。
Mm-hmm. Voice acting do be like that. Sato and the old man cackled in unison. Their plot to sucker me out of my money was painfully obvious. Well, I don't have any money for you to sucker, so... Joke's on you guys.
一つ今夜は心の選択でもして差し上げましょうかと思いまして。
I will, starting like in a few months from now.
今更野暮なことを聞きますが。
After I've gotten all my streaming stuff
私たち
situated.
警察官ですよね。
Because I have like a few new things I need to buy for art, and I'm gonna get some more emotes and another art piece, and then one other thing I was. Oh yeah, I need like a wireless mic thing for the VR streaming, which I'm setting up at the moment.
まあそれはいい子なしで。なに、10歳にはかけるわけじゃありませんよ。この後いいお店に遊びに行くときに 誰が全員分を払うのか決めるだけですって。
遊びに行く？
So at the moment, I have Phasmophobia, and I'm gonna re-buy Beat Saber on my Steam so I can stream it. But I've been like, I spent all day yesterday like setting up to, to stream from different platforms. So like I now have the capability to stream from my Switch, from my PS4, and from my PS3. And I also figured out how to stream from my VR, but I still have to set up like getting the notifications and whatnot. But I have a buddy helping me with that, so I just have to get a wireless mic so that way I can move around while I'm talking. And everything else though works, so I just have to get everything set up, and I have to buy Beat Saber again on the Steam when I get paid again. But I can play Phasmophobia right now, but I can't get the notifications yet. I have to set that up first.
どんな店に遊びに行くんですか？
I am not into VR chat at all. I have no interest. Without reservation, the three of them started suggesting places like cabarets, high-class clubs, and even brothels. At the very least, there were the types of places that you couldn't go to with money that was just for funsies.
私のお金は先日、大石さんに根こそぎ預けて、支払いは不可能ですし。
Yeah, I'll have to get into Phasmo for you guys. I've had it on my Steam forever, but I have no idea how to play, so... I lost my entire friend group to VR chat. Aw, that's sad. See, like, when I was in lockdown, which was, honestly, it wasn't until, like, January, late December, early January this year for me, I just played a shit ton of Genshin, so...
Yeah. 坊主が勝てばいいじゃねえかよ。おめえが勝ったらこの雀荘の支払いはなしで、クラウドに仕事の話でも何でもすればいい。
No matter what happened, it seemed like they were intent on playing mahjong for free. I would have to fasten my resolve a bit. If I was going to be underestimated like this forever, it was going to get in the way of my work.
わかりました。では、少しだけお付き合いします。私が勝ったら、アフターの遊びは一切なしで、すぐに仕事の話に入ってもらいますからね。
いいですとも。
俺が勝ったらフラワーのブルーマーメイドに直行だからね。
おやっさんも好きだな。私はもちろん馴染みの店をはしごしまくりですよ。あっけみちゃん。
I hate the way he said that name.
佐藤さんはどうします？
That is disgusting.
私は静かに飲めるお店でいいですよ。
静かにバニーさんとでしょ。
What a bunch of assholes.
この間飲みに行った時、あんたバニーさんの尻尾を引っこ抜いちゃったでしょ。あれ結局弁償だったの？
マスターに法政代とか言われて一本ドンペリ開けられたな。
What a lively table this was. Lively is an understatement. I could tell the other customers were glaring at us while we loudly continued our crude conversation. Speaking of which, the fact that they assumed I was the same was a bit disheartening. Uishi had taken all the money I'd brought, so everything I had left was out of my own pocket. In addition, there wasn't that much left of that either. If I kept on hanging around him like this, through his goading, my wallet would disappear into the night. I had to somehow win and return the conversation onto my job. Yeah, I can see that. I also have a thing against alcohol because a lot of my family members have had a lot of health issues due to drinking. So I've honestly been turned off by it, which is not a bad thing in moderation, honestly. But I just, like, me personally, I don't like the taste of it in general. And then I've seen so many people, like, have so many health issues because of alcohol that I just don't even want to try anymore. So I never did, but, like, I really don't want to now because of all that, so. But yeah, I'm glad that you're streaming now. That's, I mean, even, that's a weird circumstance to stream under, but it worked out in your favor. But these people, no matter how you looked at it, were pretty good. I started streaming mostly, well, I was doing, like, Let's Plays before, without this whole setup and stuff. But I started streaming, like, during lockdown, my lockdown, where I locked down myself, really. No, there wasn't, like, a world lockdown at the time, but, you know, whatever. So, like, this was, streaming and Genshin were, like, my lockdown things. But these people, no matter how you looked at it, were pretty good. Sorry. What, sorry, Yukie, that's what he said. Okay. I missed that. I don't know anything about Mahjong. I just know you, pair the different symbols together. Well, the old man and Sato-san probably won't fall for this silly Riichi. I wonder if Akasaka-kun will spit out what I need.
Why
didn't it read that in his voice? Oh ho, the old man's pretty good. He's quietly trying to use one of my safe tiles to complete his hand, isn't he? Seems that Akasaka-kun has at least learned the ropes when it comes to guarding against someone's Riichi. Oh, it's going from Oichi's point of view, I think. But that will be his downfall. Hi, Pandora. How are you? Ooh, Akasaka-kun's already fretting over this one. Nice. Good luck with your haircut. I am probably gonna get a haircut here in the next, like, few weeks or so. Finally pissed me off enough to cut it, I know, right? I waited a long time because I was super fucking broke. I waited a long time, like, probably about 2-3 months, before I just got it cut again, like, a couple weeks ago. It just, at a certain point, it's just like, alright, I have to get rid of this. It is bothering the hell out of me. I'm mahjong your mahjong with my better mahjong! It was glaringly obvious that he had a safe tile to discard, but he didn't want to throw it away because it would move him farther from completing his hand. They're so nice when they're young and innocent. Come on, hurry up and throw out the kicker. If he gave me the winning tile, we'd be heading to an establishment where I could do all- Ew. Oishi! God damn it! If he gives the old man his winning tile, we'll be heading straight to a place with maids and bloomers. This is what he wants. Okay. He looked up as he hesitantly threw out a tile that was... Oh, too bad. I hate his laugh. Oh my god, it's terrible. Seems this time you were lucky. But as long as the round kept going, I could still win off the draw. Yeah, my hair does that too when I play VR, so that's why I have to, like, be careful about my bangs. Like, I always have to sweep them over as far as I can. But honestly, I'm thinking about, like, shaving the other side of my head and the back and just having the bangs, so all I'll have to move at that point is just the bangs a little far back. But after that, Akasaka-kun managed to luckily avoid throwing any bad tiles, and somehow the round managed to end without anybody completing a hand. Sato-san had keenly anticipated the two players were in Riichi and had decided to play it safe. What a cool-headed way of playing. Now let's see what kind of hand did Akasaka-kun have. When the round ends with nobody winning in Mahjong, anybody in Tenpai has to show their hand. But if you're not in Tenpai, you have no obligation to reveal it. Your average beginner would normally show their hand even if they weren't in Tenpai, and start a commotion about how if this tile or that tile came, they would be in Tenpai. but he didn't. Being stingy?
どうだって坊主
No problem, Pandora. I'll talk to you later.
ちょっと見せてみ
I'll probably be on for a couple hours, so... Sato-san reached over to flip the hand that Akasaka-kun had casually placed face down. Lackwiz is here too! Hi! He was nowhere near Tenpai. Was Akasaka-kun totally bad at this after all? Right then, as the old man compared the tiles from Akasaka-kun's hand to the discard pool, a puzzled expression crossed his face.
坊主、おめえ、この辺りで張っとるだろ。どうして切った？
マンズの高いあたりが急に高騰しましたので、抑えました。大石さんのリーチに対して安全性が高まったのにです。筋でさばけば無難なのに、わざわざ抑えた方がいる。
おお、クラウドのテンパイなど鼻から論外っていうわけか？
相当高度な引っ掛けでなければ、私の宝珠を期待したぬるめの手かと思って。それよりもダマで張ったあなたの方がとりあえずは問題でした。
いつテンパイしたのに気づいた？
この辺りですか。ノンタイムで4連続で切ってますよね。初めは食い替えかと思いましたが、私をチラチラ見ていたので期待しているんだと気づきました。
I know this is showing that Akasaka is actually like super freaking smart, but this is boring as hell to me because I don't understand this
あ
game.
んた麻雀始めてどのくらい？
高校から大学くらいまでの間しかやっていませんよ。さあ続けましょう。佐藤さんはテンパイしなかったから流れて、次は私ですね。おや。
Oh yeah? It seems like Akasaka-kun is really aware of how the game flows. We thought we were just going to eat him alive, but it looks like it isn't going to be that easy.
大石さん。
Whoa!
想像が濃いですね。
Whoa, we get a view of what Akasaka looks like! That's cool as fuck.
回しますか。
この坊主。クラウド、降りるな。
あと3つ。いい牌が来ればな。佐藤さんはうまくいきそうです。
くそ食いたんで引きずり下ろすかチーだ
C ですか。じゃあすみません。それポンです。
Whoa now, going to call three of a kind after he declared a straight? I don't know what any of this means. Trying to override and interfere?
坊主、おめえ、離れしとるな。
まさか私が生まれる前から打ってるような方々とは比べようもないですよ。それです。ロン。トイトイ赤赤ドラさん。親ですからね。ちょっぴり高いですよ。
くわっ
赤坂さんやるな。これは我々も本気を出さないと。ねえ。
本気のついでに展望も出してもらいましょうかね。私は眠いんで手っ取り早く終わらせます。
Akasaka-kun? This is somehow unreal. Before I could realize that there was an ominous cold air emitting from beneath Akasaka-kun's feet. The hell does that
ぬるい
mean?
ですね。マンズのリャンウーパーが笑ってませんか。
ちくしょう坊主てめえ
クラウド、おめえ差し込め。坊主の親、とっとと下ろすだ。
悔しいですが、どうやらそうした方が賢明なようですね。
出たローだ太陽ドラ1
すみませんね。頭っ鼻です。ロン、ピンフ。
頭っぱねだ小僧のくせに
小僧が相手だとバカじゃあんた。その小僧いいかってわけですね。
Damn, Akasaka's got
面
balls.
白いな。あんたら連中は決まって小僧だ坊主だって言うよ。
あ、 赤坂君。
It's like he's being possessed
赤
now.
坂君ですよね。なんだかムードが変わりまくりなんですがね。
私をかもって今晩はいいお酒を飲むおつもりだったんでしょうが、どうやら皆さんの当ては外れそうです。単品3色赤1ドラ1。
おお、張ってやがったか。
だからあんたぬるいよ。いくらダマだからってこんなにぬるい三面なんだから読んでくれなくっちゃ。
Akasaka-kun chuckled as he rested his chin in his hands. The pose was so fitting it was almost scary.
おいクラウド、話がちげえぞ。初々しいカモがネギ背負ってきたって言ったのは誰だ。
いや誰でしょう。
おいさん、まずいよ。
Who could it be?
このままじゃ負けるよ、マジで。
Akasaka-kun, for you to make me get serious. It's like you really want to be milked dry.
ポンポン、気前がいいですね。もう一回ポンです。
Akasaka-kun was almost singing at this point. The tiles he had opened were all pin tiles. You can't be serious. Are you really going for the flush?
坊主、
I don't know what that means.
正気か。4つも晒したらおめっぱいが1つだけじゃねえかよ。
そうですね。知ってます？短期待ちって一番読まれにくいらしいですよ。
バカかてめえ。そこまで染めて晒しといて今更出ると思うんじゃねえ。
読めてますよ赤坂さん。それ均一でも本一でもないんでしょう。4つポンした時点でトイトイは成立してますからね。あんた今絶好の単独トップ。こいつは均一と見せかけてトイトイで食おうという挑発手でしょう。
そう思うならビンズ切ってみます？大石さんの牌の左5つ、さっきから切り損ねてるピンズですよね。それを端から順に切ってみたらいいんじゃないですか？
You must be joking. Is he a mahjong god? If not, he had to be the main character of a manga or something. It's like he's the fucking light from Death Note. The moment, the old man sent me a sign under the table. The message was simple and clear.
やれ、叩き潰せ。
こんな若い子に様は好きじゃないんですがね。
アホ、ここまで舐められて今さら弾けるか。
もう知りませんよ。ではどうぞ。
行くぞ坊主。リーチだ。オープンで行くぞ。ピンズの一数値待ちだ。
Most likely the tile that Akasaka-kun was waiting for was one of those tiles. With this, Akasaka-kun was no longer capable of winning the hand. When I drew from the wall, I switched out the tile that Akasaka-kun would draw. The tile that I put in was the one pin, one of the tiles that the old man was waiting on. Akasaka-kun discarded it a little while ago, so there was no threat of it being the one he needed.
おい、坊主の番だぜ。
I knew he was troubled that the title he drew was the one pin. Of course, he couldn't discard it.
坊主、分かってると思うが、オープンリーチに振り込んだら100万払いだぜ。
言われるまでもありませんよ。
The tile that came from Akasaka-kun's hand was an honor tile. Ain't that something? There's only one north wind tile left, isn't there? You were counting on a really rough wait, weren't you? But with this, Akasaka-kun's fate was decided.
カズ、命拾いしたな。だが、手配は1名だ。逃げきれなくなることもあるんじゃねえのか？
やっぱりそういうことか。
Akasaka-kun glared at the old man with a discerning eye. This guy had pretty good instincts. Did he figure out we were cheating?
やめましょうよ、やっさん。赤坂君の方が2、3枚は上手です。
バルイ、ここまで来てやめられるか。次行け、掴ませちまえ。
The next tile Akasaka-kun would draw was the 7 pin. With that, it would be settled. No matter which one he discarded, he'd play right to the old man's hand. An unavoidable full payout. When I drew my tile, I sneakily swapped Akasaka cons. What? Akasaka could suddenly sneeze, collapsing the wall of tiles in front of him.
おいおい、何やってんだ。
すみません。ついくしゃみをした拍子に山を崩しちゃって。
Accidentally.
バップ払いですね。親だから4000オールですか？それともバップは積み棒に？
Unable to hold back. How do you pronounce that? Is it Gaffad? Gaffad? Goofed? I don't even know. Akasaka-kun, knowing he was going to be cornered a second time and unable to escape, he took the drastic measure of knocking over his own wall.
やるな、坊主。役満払いをそういう手で防ぐとはな。ガッハハハハハ。
大石さんもそんな見え見えの積み込みは勘弁してください。これが馬場なら今ので卓をひっくり返してたところですよ。
いえいえいえいえいえいえ、すみませんすみません。あなたを侮っていましたよ。あなたどうしてお強いじゃないですか。
正直に話さんかい。若い頃はだいぶ慣らしたんだろ。
早稲田高田の馬場あたりでだいぶ遊ばせてもらいました。ちょっと勝ちまくりすぎて馴染みの店に出禁を食らいまして、今の家内にだいぶ怒られて足を洗ったんです。
勝ちまくりすぎて？あんた当時はどのくらいの勝率でやってたの？
メンツにもよりましたが、歌舞伎町あたりで打つときはほぼ負けなしでした。特に相手があれ系の人のときは命かかってましたからね。
My life was on the line? What the fuck? 20 times? What kind of stakes were those? Did you have Yakuza at your table? Or pro baseball players?
なんだクラウド、このタクはお前どっからこんなプロ雀士みたいなの引っ張ってきたんだ。もうやめだやめ。ああもう坊主、おめえの勝ちだ。降参降参。
ありがとうございます。光栄です。
いやいや、しかし赤坂さん、あんた打つと性格変わるね。なんで就職なんかしたの？あんたならフリーで十分に飯食っていけるじゃない。
プロ雀士には腕と突きの両方が必要なんですよ。私には後者がありませんでしたから。
好きなんてその時の運不運だろ。あんたほどの腕があれば十分にいけると思うがな。
波の突きじゃダメなんですよ。勘したら3回に1回くらいはそのままカンドラが4つ乗ってここぞという時に狙ってリンシャンが引ける。そのくらいじゃないと。
赤坂君、そんなのが頻繁にできたらそれはもう超能力者ですよ。
いえ、
He's a
イカ様
demon.
でも超能力でもなく、そのくらいの打ち手は結構いるんですよ。新宿で知り合った泣くたびにドラが乗りまくる雀士なんか鬼のように強かったですし、横浜で打ったプロなんかは当たり前のように一発で引き当ててましたからね。私にはああいう月がないんです。
What type of folks were those? They weren't named Ryu or Satoshi by any chance.
というわけで総合トップは私
Interesting
で
that you
よろし
chose
いです
those
ね。
names.
へいへいへい、乾杯でございますよ。負
けた負けた。久しぶりに大負けだ。
しかし打ってる時の坊主気合入ってたな。結構怖かったぜ。
よく言われます。自分ではそんなに目つき変えてるつもりはないんですがね。そんなに怖い目になってましたか？
The three of us nodded empathetically in agreement. So that was Akasaka-kun, the mahjong prodigy. Before he goes home from his assignment, maybe I could give him go play at the high stakes table in my place. But it's not good to get greedy. Definitely not. Especially not in Hinamizawa. Do not get greedy in Hinamizawa. You will die.
約束です。夜の学習会はこれでお開きにしましょう。申し訳ありませんね、おやっさん。今夜はこれでお開き。
しゃあねえな。冷えて寝るわ。体力つけんと体が持たん。
お仕事が大変なんですか？
ああ、おやっさんはひなみ沢ダムの第一工区の監督さんなんです。
Oh, he's the foreman. Well, that sucks for that guy. He's gonna fucking die.
住民とは連日小競り合いをしてますからね。
He's gonna get dismembered, actually.
しんどい商売ですよ。
来年あたり第二工区も任されちまうかもしれねえな。黒田さん、血圧上がりまくるって聞いたしよ。身が持たねえや。
Ouch. That sounds painful.
おやっさんなら大丈夫でしょう。あなた、見た目よりも面の皮厚めですしね。
That's nothing against demons, though.
俺だって仏じゃねえからな。腹渡にくり返るときあるぞ。特にその先のあの小娘は我慢がならん。
Me neither. She can be a bit of a bitch.
あいつの顔面いつか簡単には治らんくらいに歪ませたろって思ってる。
まあまあまあ。でも給料はいいんでしょ？かなり破格の給金だって聞きましたよ。
おっとりめえだ。あんなに世知辛い職場で給料が安かったら誰も残らんよ。あ、クラウド。警察はいつになったら村の人間全部追っ払ってくれるんだ。国から立ち退き命令とか出てるんだろ。
ねえ、どうなってるんでしょうね。
The old man who identified himself as the foreman of the Hinamizawa Dam spewed a few complaints until he felt better about it, then left quietly.
じゃ、行きましょう。あ
Interesting.
とは佐藤さんに任せますかね。
大石さんは帰られるんですか？
私が一緒でもお邪魔しちゃうだけでしょ。それに佐藤さんの仕事を買ったのはあなたです。私は対価を払ってませんからね。
Uchi-san was kind of sketchy, but he was strangely conscientious about certain things. I felt quite a bit of a gap between myself and Oishi's generation from that part of him I didn't comprehend.
じゃあ坊主、いやジャンシ様にもう坊主なんて言えねえな。赤坂くんでよかったっけ？
はい。
じゃあ赤坂くん行こうか。
では赤坂さん、また何か困ったことがあったらいつでも頼りに来てくださいね。
大石さんにお支払いできるような対価はもう持ってませんよ。
んじゃ、今度の勝負で少し手加減してもらえたらチャラにしますよ。
Go easy on Oishi, as if. You can't afford to do that. Oishi, seemingly still not having had his fill of playing around, but without overstaying his welcome, disappeared into the night. Oh, he'll be back. He's always back. The informant named Sato-san had me get into his car before he set off. He favored narrow roads and numerous short left turns.
左折法による尾行確認ですか？
詳しいな。
Checking to see if we were being trailed by making left turns was a rather classic technique. With just a single pursuer, you could confirm it that way. But if you were being trailed as a team, this archaic method wouldn't let you shake them. Of course, doing it anyway was better than not.
赤坂くんが何者かは旦那から何も聞いてないんだが、やっぱり警察関係かい？尾行確認に詳しいなんて、あとは探偵者くらいしか思いつかねえね。
言わなければならないものでないなら拒否したい質問ですね。
やれやれ。麻雀やってからすっかり雰囲気が大人びちまったな。会った時のあのおどおどしたあんたはどこ行っちゃったんだよ。
I smiled wryly. Looking back now, I had to be a little grateful for being made to play mahjong. Thanks to that, I was able to relieve some tension. Eventually, Sato-san, confirming that there were no cars following us, slipped outside the city. We were on a pitch-black country road, unable to see anything besides the lights outside. The only things I was able to hear was the hum of the car's air conditioning and the chirping of insects and frogs.
だからひなみ沢村については多少のことは聞いてんだろう。
御三家という旧家による支配や現在は園崎家が一党独裁をしているとかそういう話ですか。
そこまで知ってるならくだらない前置きは省略していいな。
ではお願いします。犬飼大臣の孫の誘拐に鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が関与しているか否かを。
Sato-san checked the rearview mirror one more time to confirm there wasn't anybody behind us before speaking.
昨夜園崎本家で親族会議が開かれたそうだ。
Thanks, Lack. I appreciate that. Hopefully we'll get the scary game challenge soon.
親族会議ってのは旦那から聞いてるか。
いえ。
普通に親族会議って言ったらまあ親戚が集まってお茶
Okay,
でも飲む
you all have
ようなもんだよ
raised
な。
36%. And there are how many days left? Does it say? Not sure. $55% now. Thank you, Nert.
だが園崎本家の親族会議っていうのはそんなのんびりしたものってわけが違う。
So I believe I said it's 10,000 points, and the game that has been most voted on the poll. I have other options too, but the game that has been most voted on the poll for the Scare game is Layers of Fear 2. So that's probably going to be the game I'm going to be playing for reference for the Scary Game Challenge. A family council held by the Sonozaki main house. That would be a meeting between those who truly controlled Hinamizawa village. They wouldn't be talking about private family members, it would be about the village as a whole. About organizing activities against the dam project. Among other things, everything would be decided there. In reality, they were deciding the fate of the village. At the head of the meeting was Oryo Sonozaki, more or less called Empress Sonozaki as the ultimate decision-maker of the clan. She was to be feared and respected. Infirm with old age, she was often unable to stand on her own, but her words carried enough weight to sway the fate of the village. It seemed that lately she had grown weak, and on days where she wasn't feeling well, remained bedridden. Family councils that occurred while she wasn't feeling well took place with her on the floor. In the middle of a dignified Japanese-style room, still in a futon, only the upper half of her body sitting upright, a stern look on her face. That was Oryo Sonozaki. Sitting next to her was her heir, Mion Sonozaki. She was still young. No, young wasn't quite the word. She was a girl who remained childish. Her role was to merely sit beside Oryo Sonozaki, sometimes responding to her requests. However, she was the only one deemed worthy to succeed Oryo. She had the same hawkish eyes, enough to give pause to anybody who so much as looked at them. Much was expected of her in the future, this granddaughter of the Sonozaki's leader. Also on the other side of her sat several other important members of the reigning three families, the Kimayoshi family and the Furude family. First on the list for the Kimayoshi family was, of course, the mayor of Hinamizawa village, Kiichiro Kimayoshi. Lined up beside him were several more of his direct relatives. Opposite to them sat the other of the three families, the Furude family. The Furude family was only comprised of the family of a Shinto priest, so the only ones sitting there were said priest, his wife, and their daughter Rika. Rika was doted on by many of the older folks in the village, and it seemed that Oryo was no exception. While the stress from just attending a family council was said to be enough to shorten your lifespan by 3 days, it seemed like Rika was the only one exempt from that. No matter how charged the atmosphere was around her, she paid it no mind, instead humming along as she doodled in a sketchbook. In fact, the night before, lying on her stomach with humming and doodling, she nonchalantly tucked her legs into Orio's futon like it was a kosatsu. All this was the three families, and all around the room, lined row upon row, were relatives of the Sonozaki family. The only ones who were afforded cushions to sit on were direct relatives. The others were left to sit in the seiza position directly on the tatami mats. With Empress Sonozaki enshrined at their center, they were almost like a giant snake coiled around the room. It was decided that everybody would sit in order of their rank. The number of people from the Sonozaki family was overwhelming. The fact that the Sonozaki family held so many seats at a meeting where everything pertaining to the village was decided made determining where the balance of the power was held in the three families as clear as day. The number of members in attendance from each of the families directly reflected how much influence they had in ruling Hinamizawa.
その会議で何が話されたんですか?
Sato-san, after remaining silent for a while, quietly began to speak.
マスコミ関係に支払ってる謝礼金の額が大きいんじゃないかい?
Breaking the long moment of silence was the head of the Kimayoshi family, Kiichiro Kimayoshi. The Onigafuchi Guardians wasn't a business. They were nothing more than a private organization pushing for the cancellation of the Hinamizawa Dam project, with no reliable source of income. Fundraising had always been a problem. When they first started operating, they had managed to collect a sizable amount of funds through donations, but as the conflict dragged on, that amount was steadily declining.
石を投げるだけが全ての時代じゃないさ。マスコミの力も侮れないのは重々承知しているし、今後もその力を借りたいのは同じさ。
The expressions of the people related to the Sonozaki family were sullen, as the one who suggested that they should borrow the power was the family head, Orio Sonozaki. The battle wasn't just about force of arms. In the civilized age, there were civilized methods of fighting. Orio suggested that creating a strategy incorporating the mass media. Orio's foresight was spot on, and the effects of that plan, while at first unclear, slowly began to manifest. If the physical confrontation at the construction site was meant to delay progress on the dam by even one day, then the propaganda war using the media was aimed at attacking the dam project itself. At first, there were those who had doubts about the strategy, but there was nobody now who called those results into question. But in order to maintain those media ties, a colossal amount of money was required. As long as the amount of funds they had was abundant, things would turn out fine. It couldn't be argued that it was a massive expense, but the results spoke for themselves. But with the conflict continuing to drag on, the circumstances changed. The head of the Sonozaki family, no, the one who sat at the pinnacle of the Hinamizawa's three families, Oryu, had suggested the idea herself, so it was already untouchable and continued to be allowed to drain from the budget. Nobody acknowledged that it should be so allowed, but nobody could say anything. That was the price of dealing with the mass media.
どう思う? お嬢さん。
The only person who could object to the plan proposed by the head of the Sonozaki herself was probably Mayor Kimayoshi. Oryu, with a hard-to-define expression on her face, as if she had severed herself from the fetters of mortal emotion, simply listened quietly to Kimayoshi's words. But really, it was hard to tell if she was quietly listening or didn't even have the intention of listening at all.
去年機関士の値上げの理解を得るのにも随分苦労したじゃない。一度だけってことで理解を得て、また今年もってわけにはいかないよ。ねえ、古手さん。
Excuse me. Ooh. The mayor looked to the priest and his wife from the Furude family for affirmation. The priest gave a vague expression, avoiding a prompt response. But his wife gave her answer without a second thought.
そうですね。機関士代は特に貧しい家には大きな負担になっています。みんな自分たちの村のためだからと耐えていますが、これ以上の値上げはやめた方がいいでしょうね。
The bulletin was, as the name implied, a bulletin published by the Onigafuchi Guardians. It outlined the Alliance's activities, ideals, and resolve, but you couldn't deny the contents were rather piecemeal. That bulletin's main goal wasn't to inform people, but rather was something to sell to business people, people living in the village or connected to it, and using those sales to collect funds. In other words, it had become something of a tax. Of course, it didn't have to be said that this was one of the main sources of income for the Onigafuchi Guardians. Originally, purchase was something to be voluntary, but in Hinamizawa it had silently become the opposite. In the neighboring towns as well, it seemed that many businesses were buying copies just to avoid butting heads with the Alliance. The priest whispered to his wife to not say anything unnecessary, but was struck down decidedly with a cold glare. Cowering from that glare, the priest shut his mouth. The priest's wife has always held the power in their relationship. That was because she was the one who carried the Furude bloodline. Aha! The priest merely married into the family. He was nothing more than somebody who adopted the name just to join the three families. Her voice kind of sounds familiar to Rika's voice when she changed, in that one scene. He should have been able to find a spot fairly high up in the hierarchy of things, but the lack of authority in his voice meant that he had still not gained any favor. Casting a backwards glance at her rather disparate parents, Rika continued to doodle whimsically without paying them any mind. Signaled by a look from Oryu, Mion brought her ear closer to her grandmother. There, something was said to her in a quiet voice. After responding with a couple questions, with a nod from Oryu, Mion looked around the room and conveyed her grandmother's words. Kimayoshi made a face like he had just bit into something unpleasant, but that expression quickly disappeared like it had never happened at all.
だけどミオンちゃん、君だって分かってると思うけど、機関士の負担は決して軽いものじゃない。ひなみ沢のすべての人間にかかる重みなんだ。あんまり負担をかけすぎれば内部から崩れることだって。
内部から崩れるのは誰ですか？
どれって別にそういう意味じゃ。
最初に崩れるのは誰かと聞いています。
Being cross-examined by a girl who still had fragments of childness remaining within her, the words stuck in Kimayoshi's throat as he sunk into silence. Mion's intense as fuck, man. Mion repeated her question once more, looking around the crowded room. Everybody refrained making eye contact to avoid being pierced by her gaze. The words she had spoken were unarguably said in proxy for Oryu. That's why when Mion spoke them, they carried the same weight. Oh. But the look in her eyes was different. Like Oryu's, they had a hawkish gaze, strong enough that anyone looking upon them would freeze in their tracks and yield. But that gaze was without question one that belonged to Mion herself. As Mion would eventually inherit everything from Oryu, the day she would stand up as a young and capable leader in her own right would come. Nobody wanted to believe otherwise for even a minute. That's why nobody even thought of Mion as just some sort of little kid.
Kimiyoshi-san, 機関士の値上げごときでは誰の決意も崩れませんよ。
Kimayoshi, while grumbling a little bit, made a gesture as if to say he had no objection.
マスコミ関係への出費は継続とします。その出費がさらに圧迫となるようなら、機関士の値上げもやむを得ない。
Mion had rendered her judgment. Everybody bowed their heads, silently listening to her words.
園崎家当主代行、園崎ミオンです。我が名において以上決定し、決定の効力は即日発行されるものとします。異議はこれを認めず、抵抗ある場合は実力をもって排除します。
The formal decree was read aloud, indicating her judgment. There would be no retrial, but there was a certain authority behind those words that even a courthouse couldn't compare to. If she was a judge, she would have banged her gavel, signaling that the matter was settled. Mion pulled out a large bell from the inside of her clothes and rang it. Everybody present could only prostrate themselves before the harsh sound of the bell.
なんとも大時代的な親族会議ですね。
あんたみたいな若いもんにはちょっと信じられないだろうけどね。こういう古い土地にはこんなのが未だ根強く残ってるもんさ。
It was exactly as Oishi had said. The old system of the three families had vanished, and now the Sonozaki family was running things by themselves. On top of that, their rule was borderline despotic.
会議はそれで終わりですか？
いや、まだ続く。先を続けるよ。
Story time! Again! Eventually, after the ringing of the bell ceased, there was a deafening silence. Within all of that, a lone man shuffled closer to Mion and whispered something in her ear. Mion asked several questions quietly in response. When she was satisfied, she motioned for the man to leave. The man who talked to Mion was a member of a gang that her father was the leader of. The organization had the entire area of Shishimon City under its control, so it was quite well known even here. Of course, this was talking about the criminal underworld, so it's not like just anybody would know. But just showing a patch with the gang symbol on it was enough to resolve any disputes in the neighborhood. Mion's biological father, Taoryu, was her daughter's husband. The power of that man's gang was the drive force that controlled the dark underbelly of the Onigafuchi Guardians. So that man, from his position as the next in line to control the three families, continued to coerce everybody around him with his unconventional presence. Mion exchanged a look with her father. Was it okay for her to tell what she had just heard directly to Oryu? It looked like she was asking him that question. Her father gently but firmly nodded his response. Mion also nodded, then sidled up to Oryu and informed her of something. Eventually, Mion finished conveying her message, separated herself from Oryu, and fixed her posture, waiting for Oryu to signal his response. Her response, excuse me. It wasn't often that Oryu showed any emotion. That's why, when she started to laugh quietly, a vague sense of uneasiness crept over everybody in the room.
そら、難儀なこともあったものよの。
Oryu was laughing so happily that Kimeyoshi had to hesitantly ask.
どうしたんだい、お嬢さん。
我らにとって土地が母なら、この度のダムの騒ぎは、母の命を脅かされる騒ぎっちゅうことだろうな。
Kimeyoshi, unable to comprehend the meaning of her words, looked confused. Oryu, with a wide grin on her face, turned towards everybody and addressed them in a clarion voice.
ダムの親玉の大臣がの、孫さらわれちまって、右往左往しとるっちゅう話だ。こんれでおあいこだの。
I hate that laugh. I hate that. I don't like it at all.
バカな。
Information on the kidnapping of Mr. Inikai's grandson shouldn't have leaked from anywhere. How did they know? Even we didn't know much about the kidnapping incident. Eventually, exactly how did an antiquated household so far away from Tokyo come to know of it? They know everything. It was a tranquil pace, but I couldn't help but have an uneasy feeling about Hinamizawa village. At some point, I had mentally filed this place away as unrelated to the incident in hand. That mental paperwork had just blown away in the wind.
どうして鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が知っているんだ。
Sato-san, unable to come up with an answer, fell into silence.
すみません。続きをお願いします。
なあ。
犬飼建設大臣のお孫さんがさらわれた。お嬢さん、それは本当かい？
The major of the accident was nowhere to be seen in the newspapers or on TV. But in Hinamizawa, there was nothing strange about Oreo knowing something that the rest of the world didn't.
我らの痛みは母を失う痛みじゃの。それに値するとは思わんが、孫を失う痛み。少しは答えるといいんじゃがの。なあ。
The last question wasn't addressed to anybody in particular. It was as if she was looking for a consensus.
だが、 土地と人様の子供ではわけが違うの。隠すのは構わんが怪我だけはさせたくないものよの。こにゃ何の罪もねえ。大事にしたれな。
So she's not totally
それはつま
heartless.
り鬼ヶ淵獅子同盟が誘拐事件に関与していると。
必ずしもそうとは言えねえな。
どうして当主であるお涼がこれほどまではっきりと誘拐した孫の処遇について指示を出しているのに。
兄さん、これはね、園崎家のいつものことなんだよ。
いつものこと？それはどういう意味です？
Let's say there was a particular problem, one that wasn't exactly favorable for the Sonozaki family. Borio shows concern over that particular problem. Hearing that, somebody who attended the family council would be helpful. As a result, Orio's wish would be granted. However, neither Oreo or anybody else would know who actually did it. With this kind of clever little ploy, the Sonozaki family was able to manipulate events even though they had their hands laid out on the table.
では親族会議に出席していた誰かが犯人ということですか？
あるいはそもそも犯人なんかいない可能性だってあるよな。俺自身その万座の一同の中に誘拐犯がいるって確信を持ってるわけじゃない。ただ自分の意見を述べただけさ。
It was not an unpleasantly secretive way of doing things. Were they involved or weren't they? I couldn't see beyond the veil. This much, however, I could say with certainty. This kidnapping was an ironclad secret. No matter how high a position somebody was in, even they wouldn't know about it. If there was somebody who would know about it, they would be connected to public safety. In other words, one of us. The only other options were people connected to the case itself. Including the minister, there would be people affected by the incident, or the people that committed it. In any case, there was no way the old household in a place removed from Tokyo by over 6 hours of highway travel should know about it. Them knowing it all was already strange. My suspicions began to accumulate, like falling snow.
孫の誘拐についてお涼が述べたのはここまでだ。あんたの知りたかったことが含まれてりゃいいんだがな。あとは兄ちゃんの仕事だな。何のお仕事やってるか知らんけど、園崎家を相手にするなら相当の覚悟でやっとけよ。大石の旦那は怖いもの知らずだけどな。あれでも 2,3 回は襲われてる。最近は来てないけど、一時はオフの時も防塵ベストを着込んでたんだよな。
ええ、忠告ありがとうございます。
Yeah, they don't like him
気をつけることにし
at
ま
all.
す。
Oishi is not well liked by the community for various reasons.
兄さんは東京とかの人？
え？それが何か？
Investigators were always close to danger. It was best not to divulge any information on myself.
兄さんのお仕事だけどさ、ひょっとして警視庁の公安部の人ってことある？
I couldn't remain silent here. It would be the same thing as admitting it.
え？まさか。
こっから旦那からもらった金の範囲には入らないんだが、兄さんとは今日宅を囲んだ仲間だからな。サービスってことで話してやるよ。お涼から誘拐の話が出た後、もう一つ話題が出たんだ。
Another topic that Oreo brought up. Right before he told me this, Sato-san asked if I was from the Metropolitan Public Safety Division. In other words, what those two things meant caused a chill to run up my spine.
そんでな、大臣の孫さらったのは調べるために東京からはるばる公安の捜査官が派遣されてくるっちゅう話だ。
Ah, so they know. They know it's him.
大臣の孫の誘拐な、警視庁の公安部が独自で調べとるっちゅう話だ。はっ、大行なこったの。 んどうした
Rika, who had been drawing it the entire time and was completely uninterested in the conversation up until now, looked at Oreo with an interested face as soon as the topic of public safety came up.
警視庁が来たのですか？
リカちゃまは警視庁も知ってなさるんかい。えらいの。
誰が来たのですか？
公安のどんな奴が来よったんか。誰ぞわかる奴はおらんかいな。
Mion's father raised his hand slightly.
新米の若造が一人と聞き及んでおります。
新米？ほかほかなのですか？
んええ、はい。新米とか。
Mion's father smiled wryly as he answered Rika's question. I do not like the way he answered that.
ほかほかのふかふか？
I don't like the way she's talking about it. It sounds like cannibalism.
ほかほかのふかふか？
Rika smiled with interest. Why did Rika suddenly act interested only when it came to this topic? That was a question that apparently nobody had the answer to.
リカちゃまはその男のこと何か知っているのかな？
知んないのですよ。
After her rather flat reply, Rika buried herself underneath Oreo's futon again. When she buried herself there, Rika no longer started drawing again. Instead, she was making expressions like she was deep in contemplation.
どうしますか?
Interesting.
お母さん。
Mion's father posed the question. He had the type of uncouth expression on his face indicating that, given the order, he could snuff the problem out at any time. He sounds like he's a big dude. He could probably crush Akasaka with his freaking hands.
しばらくはのんびりさせてやるのもよかろう。
泳がせろということでしょうか。
Mion's father asked in response. Oreo smiled thinly as she responded.
ほっといたれな。が、あんまりおいたが過ぎるようやった。そん時は遠慮せんとな。なめられるのはすっきゃせんね。
Oh, nobody's treating you lightly, ma'am. Not at all.
まさかあんた、その警視庁の新米じゃないよな。
まさか。
Sensation of cold, bristling fear began to crawl its way up my back. This family council took place last night. In other words, yesterday. Then today, when I was dressed up as a tourist headed to Hinamizawa, my cover was already blown. When I remembered the first person I met when I got to the bus stop, I couldn't breathe. The person at the family council who expressed interest in the man being dispatched from the Metropolitan Police, Rika Furude. And then the person who was waiting for me the whole time in the bus shelter, Rika Furude. It was an unthinkable image. No, it was a delusion. When we met at the bus shelter, did Rika-chan already know my true identity? She knows everything. She know that I was Akasaka, dispatched from the Metropolitan Police Department and come to meet me? Then, including Mayor Kimayoshi, every villager that I had met, everybody knew but just pretended not to? Because Oreo had given instructions not to interfere? Thinking about it logically, it didn't seem possible. Send in the Rika? I met quite a number of people. If there's people that are good at acting, then there's people who are bad at hiding things. I am bad at both of those things. I am bad at acting and I am bad at hiding things. I cannot lie to save my life. If there was that many people, then there should have been somebody among them who knew I was from public safety and couldn't hide their hostility. However, I didn't feel any presence like that. But then, even still, why did Oreo tell them to leave me alone? Was it because if they were careless about it, it would only raise more suspicion? Or was it because they believed a rookie like me wouldn't be able to find anything? Akasaka is a coward. I recalled that strange voice who could only make me believe that Rika-chan had been possessed. That unknown entity, no matter how you looked at it, knew my true identity from the get-go. And then how did it warn me again? That's right. It warned me to hurry up and go back to Tokyo. Instead of the realistic worry that the Onigafuchi Guardians had discovered my identity, the absurd worry brought on the unknown girl stuck with me more. What exactly was that girl? That is the question. What was the thing I would eventually regret? That mysterious girl. Rika Furude. Let's stop this. Everything I was thinking of right now was merely conjecture. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, I'll report everything I heard right now to HQ and await further orders. There was no mistaking that the possibility the Onigafuchi Guardians were related to this case was there. And the fact that my cover was blown meant I was in a precarious position. But as everybody at HQ was already extremely busy, they might not be able to spare the support.
もういいかい? よければ好きなところまで送るよ。
あ、すみません。では、お会いした元の駅までお願いします。
A rural road where even a streetlight was rare. I couldn't see anything. I wasn't aware of anything but the asphalt that was lit up by the headlights. Outside of that light, was it simply darkness? Or was there something lurking there waiting to strike? I had to think I drew the short straw here. I wanted to go back to Tokyo. For some reason, the voice of the girl warning me to go back to Tokyo still lingered in my head. Of course it did. Why would you want to be in Hinamizawa of your own free will? That's just asking for trouble, yo. There's another chapter, goddamn. Alright. New tips, let's go. The investigation runs aground. My stomach. I just had lunch, so.
昨日銀座の料亭でお会いしてね。そういう話が出たんだよ。
別室の謁見でしょう。連中、公安に干渉しすぎですよ。あまり迎合すると悪い洗礼を残しますね。
犬飼大臣は公安の動きに不快感をあらわにしているらしい。多分月曜の町議で時間からその旨の話が出るんじゃないかと思う。
Yeah, I would also like to go visit that town one day.
参ったな。
That would be really, really cool.
次回へは局長級に話つけてもらうしかないですよ。給料を多くもらってる人の当然の仕事ってことで。
まあそうなると局長からは絶対に大臣脅迫の物証を求められるよ
な。あの人たまにどっちの味方か分かんなくなりますね。うちらの味方しなくてどうすんのっての。
まあ多分大臣を経由しての圧力だと思ってるけどね。俺が時間室で油汗かいて時間稼ぐ間に調査進めてもらうしかないよな。全身の汗絞られて絞りかすになっちゃうかもしれないけどな。でどうなの調査の進行は。
期待してた濃厚なラインがことごとく外れて正直途方に暮れてます。
最近の大臣発言をまとめるとひなみ沢ダムの計画の話が目立つっていう報告を聞いたけど、それはどうなの？
Gonna get spooked yourself? What are you playing?
目立つっていうか本当に微細な程度の違和感ですね。たまたま県議連でのスピーチだったから時事ネタを話しただけかもしれないし。
確か地元団体が過激に抵抗してるってやつだっけ？鬼ヶ淵死守同盟。確か赤坂君に調べてもらってたよね。
僕は連中には今回の事件は起こせないと踏んでいます。ですが疑わしいところのほとんどが真っ白な以上疑いの枠から外すわけにはいかないかもですね。
Close to the sun. Okay, interesting. I actually have BioShock on my Steam. I've just not played it yet. So. I'll play that eventually. That sounds cool.
なら調べてみる価値はあるんじゃないの？しらみつぶしなんだから残る疑わしい団体がそこ一つならやるしかないでしょ。
まあ調べる団体はそこだけじゃないんですがね。
Good luck with that. Enjoy that.
鬼が淵と同じ程度のレベルで疑わしい団体になると、もう相当の数になりますよ。人手も時間も残業代も全然足りません。
赤坂君からさ、もうちょっと詳しく聞いてみてよ。俺はちょっと要注意に感じるけどな。
彼、村人とうまく接触できたって連絡してきました。現地の警察とも連携できてるみたいですね。
赤坂君との連絡密にしてください。それで彼からの情報が引っかかるようであれば、増援を送ることもありということで。
Oh, they already know. You don't even need to worry about keeping his stuff on the down low.
わかりました。あ、すいません、片岡市長。局長からお電話です。こっちに回しますか。
ああ、いい。そっち行きます。もしもし。
Interesting. What's in the box? Do I want to know what's in the box? Do you believe that there are choices in life? There are many people who lament the following. There only existed points in life where there were clear choices to make. We will be able to scrutinize those carefully and make decisions that would lead us to a better future. Every time I hear people lament as such, I cast it off as a rather trivial worry. Even if you were given a clear choice, it wouldn't be meaningful at all, and there wouldn't be any such path to a better future. Is this hard to understand? Then let's pretend that in front of you there are two strange boxes. In other words, you have two clear choices. Do you open the red box or the blue box? A lot of things will be uncertain even with that choice, wouldn't they? If you don't have the option of opening neither, then your choice boils down to the natural impulse of opening the box that holds the better result for you. Then after examining the shape and features of each and pondering a great many things, you have to pick either the red or the blue. If this was you, which box would you open? Red or blue? If you were going to go by their traditional meanings, then red would be dangerous, threatening color. However, that doesn't automatically mean that it would be calm and relaxing inside the blue box either. In fact, it might even be that the colors are a trap, making you wary of the red box and have you open the blue. A trap? Could it be the contents of the box aren't a reward, but rather a penalty? See, now you're at a loss. You're so conflicted over the choice between red and blue that you've started wishing there was an option to open neither and just leave. But there isn't. You have to open either the red box or the blue box. Oh, I forgot to say this, but if you choose one box, the other will disappear. So you'll never know the contents of the box you didn't open. I'll just put that rule at the end there for you. No. Why don't you choose the red box or the blue box? It's alright, you won't lose anything by picking either one. Come on now. I don't want to. Shit. You know what? We're gonna roll a dice for this. I'm gonna go get my dice. Because I need to use my dice for. Alright. Okay, so if it's... We're gonna roll an even-sided dice. Let's see. Let's do a... I don't roll a 10-sided dice very often. Let's roll a 10. If it's 1 to 5, we open the red box. If it's 6 to 10, we open the blue box. It's 4, so we're gonna open the red box. Have you thought about it? Not really. I didn't really think about it. I just decided to rely on the fate of the dice, which is probably gonna screw me over, honestly. Have you thought about it? In the end, you chose this color, didn't you? No, I put my dice in the wrong box. God damn it. Fuck. I should just keep dice, like, on my streaming layout all the time, so whenever I go to make choices, I'll just be like... That's what I need to do one of these days. Just do a stream where, like, all the choices I make with dice. That would be hilarious. I think something's open in here. Stuff's kind of filling out. Why is my bag like this? I think it's fine. I think I got everything out of it. In the end, you chose this color, didn't you? As soon as you chose, the other box disappeared. So you can give up on the contents of that one, okay? That's the rule. Now open up the box you chose. Inside the box there was a piece of caramel. I know you're a little disappointed. Well, that's only natural. That's fair. I'll take caramel. You know, that sounds good. No matter how you look at it, it looks like you drew the dud. The correct box might have had a bar of chocolate in it for all you know. No, in fact, something incredible like a pair of tickets to Hawaii might have been in there. Not like I could have gotten that IRL, but whatever. But even if you had wanted to verify that, the other box has already disappeared. There's no way you could check now. But if you think about it from an optimistic point of view, just maybe, the other box was empty and this box was the winner. And being satisfied, or perhaps not, with such a cheap prize, you pop it in your mouth and start chewing it happily. What if there's a needle in there? So what do you think in the end? If you were given a second chance, would you try to open the other box? But unfortunately, the chance to choose between the red box and the blue box has gone and never be seen again. The chance to change your selection will never come. Unless I restart the game! Do your parents often say every choice you make in life only happens once, so choose carefully? See? Choices aren't that great after all. Aren't you a little disillusioned now? Interesting. That's a very interesting conversation. The glint in the demon's eye.
はい。それでお通夜が明日の午後6時からになりまして、告別式があさってのお昼。12会場は沖宮セレモニーホールになります。
そっか。池澤助役のお孫さんの葬式じゃ。何にも挨拶なしってわけにもいかんね。ミオ、代わりに出てえな。
Did he die?
うん、了解。喪服で行く？香典はいくらくらい？
学校の服でえんね。前のボタンちゃんと止めてくんねよ。香典は5万。10万包んだりな。世話になったかんな。
Mion quietly whistled and gnawed the exorbitant amount of money her grandmother was offering.
池澤さんはな、沖宮の事務所長だった頃からしっかりした人だったね。役人は挨拶って言っても絶対に玄関までしか来ん。でもな、池澤さんはわしがお茶を勧めるといっつも上がってくれて、ちゃんと話を聞いてくれた。人の話を最後まで聞く本当に鏡みたいな人だったんね。
The two guests made a show of nodding, making it clear they were paying attention as Oreo reminisced. The sight of them trying not to get on Oreo's bad side was humorous enough to elicit laughter from Mion occasionally.
で、池澤助役のお孫さんはいくつで亡くなったんね。
11歳だそうで。
Oreo closed her eyes and shook her head lightly, lamenting the loss of such a young life.
確か孫は一人だ言うてんな。親より先に死ぬほどの親不幸はあるめな。
ばっちゃんも他人には優しいね。あたしやシオンが死んだら同じように悲しんでくれる？
アホ抜かすんでね。演技でもねすったなんとシャラーあったく。
Having got the reaction she expected, Mion cackled. The two guests, unsure if they were supposed to laugh along, instead forced awkward smiles.
それでは本日は失礼いたします。では 明日の夕方5時にお迎えに参りますんで、よろしくお願いいたします。ではごめんくださいませ。
After bowing their heads repeatedly, the guests left by the front door. Mion saw them waving her little hand goodbye.
帰ったよ。お役人もバッチャのご機嫌伺いに大変だね。不法なんか電話でいいと思うのにね。
Well, it was true that Oryo Sonozaki was a central person for both her relatives and the residents of Hinamizawa village as a whole. As a voting bloc, they numbered in the several thousands. It wasn't hard to imagine the mayor would try to pander to her. Unlike Mion, however, Oryo was looking up longingly at the sky from the veranda.
どうしたの？猛録した？
誰のお孫さんであろうと気の毒だのう思ったんよ。
Saying that, she let out a deep sigh. Mion was let down, as normally her grandmother would have scolded her for her attitude.
ミオ、これ例の大臣の孫。さらわれてからどのくらいになる？
4日かな。
Okay, so it's been 4 days. Oreo let out another deep sigh.
旧敵の孫とはいえ気の毒だな。
そう。
十分気はせいたんろ。そろそろ終わりにしちゃれな。
The painful expression drained from Mion's face. The playful expression. The painful expression. The playful expression drained from Mion's face, leaving behind a stern one. And then, as if to ascertain Oreo's will, looked into her eyes. Oreo, expressing her intention with only those eyes, looked back into Mion's.
お茶が欲しんて頼んでな。さっきのチョコレートも食べといね。
Mion gave a small nod, then turned around.
シミコさん、いますか？バッチャに紅茶入れてあげてください。
From far away, a voice responded in the affirmative. Mion, after confirming she'd been heard, picked up the phone and began dialing.
あ、もしもし？ミオンだけど。うちのお父さん、います？
Interesting. Very interesting. Let me save here. I'm not sure how many chapters there are. That was chapter 3. I'm going to go a little bit longer today, but I'm probably going to take a very small break, like maybe 2 minutes. So I will, why am I signed out? What is happening? Not on Twitch, on my, my Twitter. Okay, so, I will put up my BRB screen. Oh. Maybe. Am I still good? Maybe I will. Okay, there we go. My Streamlabs is being a bit weird today, but it's fine. It's fine. It's just like pausing and freezing on me for every like weird moment. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and put up my BRB screen. I will be right back. Alright, I'm back. Hi. We're on to chapter 5? That was chapter 4, right? I think. I had a restless night's sleep. I would say so. Lack, you're so funny. This is why I keep you around. You're so funny. I did nothing but turn over repeatedly during a night that seemed like it lasted for eternity. Even then, I eventually fell asleep at some point, not realizing how high in the sky the sun had risen. I shook off the urge to go back to sleep. That's very hard to do. It was then I noticed the phone was ringing. You're rolling on the floor. That might be a little dangerous, but just be careful. The time was almost 10:30 in the morning. It was clearly too late for a wake-up call. You're going to the circus now? That sounds like fun. You should, invite me next time. Waking up to the sound of Oishi's voice was a little too much of a shock. My delicate ears, say-so ears, were ringing. But thanks to the shock, I was suddenly wide awake.
どうも。おはようございます。
ひょっとして今お目覚めですか?
Why did you say it like that?
出張中とはいえ勤務時間には起きないといけませんよ。
Well, excuse me.
まったくです。以後気をつけます。
あなたの眠気をもう一つ覚ましてあげられるかもしれない話があります。
Oh, do you? Do you have another tidbit for me? I would love to hear it. Sorry, I'm checking my Streamlabs for a second, making sure everything's working because I have a lot of shit to look at. Okay.
ひなみ沢駐在所から届いた遺失物に興味深いものが混じっていたんです。
遺失物?
Interesting.
詳しい話はこちらにいらっしゃってからにしましょう。お昼前に来れますか?
いえ、すぐに伺います。
Oishi already knew what my mission was. Since Oishi said it was something that would wake me up, it was hard to believe that it would be irrelevant to me. Honestly speaking, judging by the information from Sato-san yesterday, knowing that my cover was already blown, I couldn't wander to and from Hinamizawa carelessly. In other words, my investigation was at an impasse. There was some information that could put me back on the trail that would be nothing less of a stroke of good fortune. After vigorously washing my face, I pulled on my jacket and hailed a taxi, heading towards the Okinomiya police station.
Oh, 来た来た。天才ジャンシ様の到着だ。
遅くなって申し訳ありません。で、一体何が出たんですか?
With absolutely no intention of reminiscing about last night's mahjong game, I pressed him to get to the point. Oishi, anticipating that I would act that way, cut to the chase without any resistance.
先ほども申し上げましたが、今朝ひなみ沢の駐在所から遺失物が届きました。
Lost items that were turned over to the police box were sent to Okinomiya Station after the paperwork was filled out. Oishi pulled out a plastic bag from a drawer and laid its labeled contents on the desk.
財布ですか?
A wallet?
でしょうな。中には小銭はあってもお札はなかったもんなんで、スリが中身を抜いた後に捨ててったのかななんて思ったんですがね。最初は。
I didn't understand how this wallet so far removed from Tokyo could possibly be related to the kidnapping. If it had drawn Oishi's attention, it would have to be something dramatic, like if the wallet belonged to the missing grandchild. That would be absurd. Like something that convenient would happen. If that was it, there would probably be initials written on the wallet. Like the initials of Toshiki Inukai, the minister's grandson, T.I. Thinking like that, at this point it didn't surprise me that this wallet was something that could get Oishi so excited. I didn't suppose this wallet was something that could get Oishi so excited. Oishi, after pulling on a pair of disposable plastic gloves, handed me a pair of the same. I didn't feel that this wallet was such an important thing, so I had my doubts about whether there was any point in putting on gloves. However, I didn't want Oishi's attentions to go to waste, so I put them on. Oishi opened up the plastic bag and pulled it out, showing me the back. As I had imagined, there were initials engraved there, but it was slightly more detailed than what I had thought, with Toshiki I marked on it. Oishi grinned at me with a look on his face that said, "See? We can't confirm from that this belongs to the minister's grandson," I informed him calmly. This wallet was irrelevant. It was nothing more than Oishi's overeagerness. First of all, there was absolutely no way in this distant locale that the missing grandson's wallet would be found with such convenient timing. After all, the Onigafuchi Guardians wasn't related to this case in the first place. So there was no way this wallet belonged to the grandson. Why I wanted to decide that was the case, even I didn't really know. Even though what should have been a top secret was leaked before I had even been dispatched. In this situation, how could I say this was definitely unrelated? Would it be more prudent to pay more attention to this wallet? It had only been a couple of days since I arrived in Hinamizawa, but in those couple of days, due to the number of remarkable events, my nerves might have become just a little afraid. Shaking my head slightly, I cleared it of unnecessary thoughts. Oishi opened the wallet zipper, revealing the contents. Inside was small change and a number of crumpled receipts. Oishi from that jumble pulled out a folded card. Seeing that, my heart stopped for a moment. It was a card from a dental examination. The name Toshigi Inukai and the age, a perfect match. The dentist's location was in Tokyo. There was no need to explain any further. How far was it from Tokyo to Hinamizawa? It was far enough to take the bullet trains and cars would still take several hours. Why would a wallet with a dental examination card from Tokyo inside show up in Hinamizawa? Could it belong to a tourist who came from Tokyo? Or maybe a villager on vacation in Tokyo just happened to pay a visit to the dentist? No, it had to have fallen into somebody's bag by accident. In my mind, I desperately struggled to find a possible excuse as to why this wallet didn't belong to Toshiki Inukai. It was as if this just wouldn't do for this wallet to belong to him. However, weeding out any possibility for error one by one, the haze surrounding the wallet in front of me faded, gradually letting it come into clear focus. I felt a shiver of electricity run up my spine. My pulse quickened and a thin film of sweat began to coat my entire body. From Oishi's point of view, I was probably slack-jawed and spaced out, with a slovenly look on my face.
この歯科には問い合わせましたか?
そりゃ赤坂さんの仕事でしょ。私はまだそこまでは。
この財布はいつ頃のものでしょうね。
拾ったのは村人です。昨日のことだそうで。
じゃなくて、この財布はいつ頃落ちたものでしょうね。
ここいらに雨があったのはちょうど先週7日前。中身が水にやられた様子はないから、最長で6日前からでしょうね。
この財布の存在は署内で誰が知ってます？
Hi, Pandora. Welcome back.
初期対応のひなみ沢駐在所の警官。
And Lack, you better greet him with the same sassy-ass remark that you made to me.
それから遺失物対応で係が 2,3 人。あとは私とあなた。内緒の事件と関係があったらまずいでしょ。
Thank you. I'll say, if you're gonna treat me with sass, you have to treat everybody else with sass. That's how this works.
ベラベラとは喋ってないつもりですよ。
電話を借りていいですか？
どうぞどうぞ。外線は0発信から。
I dialed the phone number inscribed on the examination card. I could hear my pulse pounding inside my head. Could there be possibly something so absurd? The addresses on the receipts and cards inside the wallet were all from around the area where the grandson lived. The name on the examination card was also a match. The time was deduced that the wallet had been left behind also matched up with the timeline of the kidnapping. Of course, it was possible I would just laugh it off as all a big pile of coincidences. There wasn't any strong evidence. Rather than all this circumstantial proof, the contents of the phone call I was about to make would have much greater meaning.
はい、お待たせしました。中川歯科です。
どうも。こちらは沖宮署です。実はお財布の落とし物がありまして、所有ご協力をいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。お財布の中にそちら様の診察カードが入っておりまして、氏名は犬飼俊樹くんです。カードの番号を申し上げますので、電話番号をお調べいただいてもよろしいでしょうか。ありがとうございます。お願いできますか。
Still holding the receiver, I pulled out a notebook from my breast pocket with my free hand. I opened it up to the page with the grandson's address and phone number recorded on it.
どうもすみません。はい。お願いします。
I compared the phone number written in my notebook to the one that was being read out on the other end of the line. It was the same. During that process, I spun around to look behind me uneasily. I locked eyes with Oishi. Oishi looked puzzled, wondering what the matter was. Why would I feel uneasy and look behind me? That was because the person on the other end of the line was reading out the numbers as though doing so straight from my notebook. It seemed that HQ was in quite an uproar thanks to my report. No matter how many times the authenticity of the evidence I had linked to the grandson was called into question, I can only respond that it was the truth. When the lead investigator first picked up the phone, I was grilled about the evidence I'd found that it was almost too good to be true, if I do say so myself. But after having doubt after doubt dispelled, he fell into silence. The receiver was finally handed over to the section chief. When he picked it up, the background thrum on the other end of the line disappeared, and I knew that it had gone completely silent. After asking the same questions about the wallet that the lead investigator did, the chief quietly spoke his next words.
わかりました。こちらから何人か増援を送ります。今日の夕方には到着できるでしょう。赤坂君は引き続き現地調査をお願いします。財布が発見された地域の情報を収集しててください。加納さんは何人か選んで現地へ直接。
The fact that he was sending Kano, the lead investigator here, meant that the chief had decided there was a possibility that the Onigafushi Guardians were somehow implicit in the kidnapping. However, it felt as though until the lead investigator, whom he trusted, had verified the evidence with his own eyes, he was still going to be skeptical about it.
どうでした？
本庁から増援が出発するそうです。私は現地調査を命じられました。財布の落ちていた場所はどこなんです？
高津戸のあたりだそうです。ここが沖宮。ずーっと行ってここがひなみ沢で、さらに上流にぐーっと上がっていくとこの辺が高津戸です。
Oishi explained where the wallet was found by pointing to locations on the map on the wall. This place called Takatsudo was even more remote than Hinamizawa was.
高津戸界隈はほとんど民家なんかありませんよ。昔の廃村です。無人の家屋が点在するなんとも寂しいあたりですね。
Hi, hi, Pred. How are you?
高津戸へ案内してもらうことはできますか？
構いませんよ。赤坂さんお一人ではなかなか自由にひなみ沢に出入りはできないでしょうからね。
Oh, I feel that. The heat is terrible.
無論、
I'm doing all right.
野球帽とマスクをしてもらうことになりますが。
That Oishi had agreed to accompany me was very reassuring. If Sato-san's info was to be believed, my cover had been grown. I know, right? That's insanity. It's been like in the 90s here. Like Fahrenheit. It's insane how hot. I wasn't sure if the villagers had realized that the fresh meat dispatched from public safety was the tourist that had visited the village yesterday. In other words, me. But deciding that they hadn't noticed would be overly optimistic. No problem, Lack. Have fun. Yeah, we got a storm yesterday, but it didn't really help with the weather, to be honest. I mean, it was a little cooler But it's right back to being freaking... What is the temperature right now? Fair enough, I guess it is a little cooler. It's 78 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's a little cooler than what it was before. Given a cursory thought, Takatsudo, where the wallet was found, couldn't be ruled out as a hiding spot for the kidnappers. The Takatsudo area didn't have any residential buildings, nor was it alongside a highway. There wasn't a reason for even the locals to go out of their way to visit it. You want for it to flood? That seems like a pain in the ass, if you ask me. It was exactly what you would call a long-forgotten ghost town at the end of the road. You couldn't ask for a better place to hold a kidnapped grandson. Also, you couldn't get to Takatsudo without passing through Hinamizawa first. Those several conditions made the area all the more important. I couldn't brush it off any longer. There was no longer any doubt the Onigafuchi Guardians or somebody hired by them were involved in the kidnapping. Oh, I'm sorry, nerd. I'm so sorry you couldn't stream. That makes me sad. If that was the case, then the fact that this wallet was found might have already been leaked into them. They even know so much about the Public Safety Division was operating. The case of the wallet couldn't be something they didn't know. In that case, there was a possibility that the enemy was lying in wait. To dive alone into enemy territory surrounded by enemy territory, to say the least, required an amount of courage, nay recklessness, that I just did not have.
大石さんの同行がなければ、そうおいそれと踏み込めない村でしたので、ご協力いただけて本当に助かりました。正直なところ、またお金を要求されるのではと思ってましたよ。
Even if your stream doesn't work, you're always welcome back to Hinamizawa.
それは正直を言えば、Hinamizawaなんか好き好んで行きたがないですからね。運賃でも弾んでもらいたい気分ですが、でも一緒に卓を囲んだ友人の頼みとあれば断るわけにはいきませんしね。
Oh, I don't like that he's this close to me. Oishi grinned as he pounded me on the back. It struck me that he just didn't want to jump ship rather than having any sort of sense of duty towards his job. Even so, that didn't really matter. Right now, I really appreciated the gesture.
では、早速出してもらえますか?
Just don't get on his bad side. The enemy knew that the police had obtained the wallet. Then they would have probably moved the hostage to a different place. There wasn't a moment to lose. But Oishi, without regard to the fact that they were able to head out, began to remove his jacket.
何を知ってるんですか?
まあ用心ですよ。家中の栗を拾うなら相応の用意が必要と思いましてね。あなたも来ますよ。
What Oishi pulled from the drawer behind the desk was a stab-proof vest. That's probably a good thing to have. His name was Toshiki Inukai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction, Inukai. There was only one reason for him being here. If you didn't include gym or art class, his grades were above average. That was the result of having private tutoring sessions twice a week. If you omitted the fact that he still couldn't do pull-ups, there wasn't much else that would make him hate school. Of course, he understood full well that his grandfather was a cabinet minister. But he also knew that not too many people were that interested in their relationship. He didn't like to go out of his way to bring up his grandfather or to call him the Minister of Construction. And finally, he at least tried to know a little more about what kind of work the Minister of Construction did than your average Joe. What that entailed was that when you tried your best to make life better for the masses, sometimes you made a few enemies. He knew that all too well from the time he'd spent as class representative. His grandfather had many enemies. He knew that he might personally catch some of that fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents. That's why the moment he was kidnapped, he instantly knew this was one of those occasions. He understood that he was being treated as Toshiki Inukai the person, but rather... He wasn't being treated as Toshiki Inukai the person, but rather as Toshiki Inukai the grandson of the Minister of Construction. that he wasn't personally at fault, but that this was the result of some unavoidable trouble with his grandfather's work. It made little difference, but when he realized it wasn't because of anything he did, he was able to relax, if only a little. Of course, at first he was struck with a terror befitting his age, wondering what was going to happen to him. But after a while, being tied up and only being able to stay lying down, he began to ponder a great many things. First, he thought about the reason he was being abducted like this. He understood the answer to that easily. He was taken hostage to coerce his grandfather, the minister. There was no doubt about that. He didn't know exactly what the Minister of Construction did, but it was easy to imagine there was much to be gained from threatening him. He respected his grandfather more than most. He earnestly believed that his own grandfather was within the top 20 of the most important people in Japan. That was exactly why he wouldn't forgive anybody who tried to threaten his beloved grandfather. More importantly, he wouldn't forgive anyone who would use him as a tool to threaten his grandfather. His grandfather was really busy and rarely had time to meet with relatives. That's why, with what little time he did manage to scrape together, he just dropped by unannounced. And as an apology for not being able to meet during New Year's or summer vacation, he doted on his grandson very, very much. The number of times that Toshiki was looked upon with disregard just because his grandfather was a politician and minister certainly weren't few. But he never thought even once that he wanted his grandfather to quit being a politician. Because it was his beloved grandfather, he wanted him to continue his career as long as possible from the bottom of his heart. However, Toshiki was now being held hostage, and his grandfather was being threatened. His grandfather, who called him the apple of his eye, was surely suffering. He might do anything to save his grandson. He might even put aside his ideology if it was required to save his grandson. He might cave into the culprit's demands if it meant saving his grandson. When Toshiki thought about that, an inexplicable anger welled up within him. In his current situation, he was unable to forgive the cowards who had made his beloved grandfather suffer by using such dastardly means. That feeling swelled up inside of him, displacing the fear. What he thought of first was something any boy would imagine. Get out of these bonds, beat up the bad guys, then hand them over to the police. Images of all the brave heroes from all the manga he had read passed through the back of his mind. In his imaginary scenario, he slipped his bonds easily, floated like a butterfly to evade his captors, then stinging like a bee to bring them all down. In the end, it was nothing more than his silly little fantasy, but with his vision obstructed and unable to see anything, it was something that he could get into more than any anime at the moment. In actuality, he was enjoying these little scenarios in his head for the long period of time that he was tied up. His captors hadn't really done anything to him that they would feel sorry for. However, eventually he began to grow tired of his fantasies, and more realistic scenarios began to run through his head. It was then he realized that none of them were a solution. Yes, he wanted to do something for his grandfather who was being threatened. That he was being held here to inflict pain on his grandfather was the thing that he could least forgive, and also the most vexing. And then he noticed. There was a much simpler way he could save his grandfather without having to beat up his despicable captors. That was to remove himself as a hostage from the hands of these villains. If he was to disappear from here, his captors would have nothing to threaten his grandfather with. The captors had restrained him, but they didn't treat him roughly, and they made sure he was fed well enough. Meaning, at most, he was nothing more than the means for their threat. They weren't looking to bully or kill him out of spite. If he behaved, no ill would befall him. Realizing that gave him a strong sense of courage. And carrying his train of thought this far, he let it run its course to its natural conclusion. Right now, at this moment, Toshiki Inukai had decided to escape. His ears had been stuffed with a sponge-like material acting as a makeshift earplugs. However, they didn't actually do much to block out any sound, and he could overhear everything his captors were saying. Realizing that this was to his advantage, even when his captors spoke to him, he acted like he couldn't hear them due to the earplugs. His captors, thinking that he couldn't hear their conversation, talked about all sorts of things without any reservations. Thanks to that, he was able to obtain various pieces of information. First off, this definitely wasn't Tokyo. It seemed that this was quite a distance away, and on top of that in the countryside, nestled deep in the mountains. It also seemed that his captors were inconvenienced living out here, so he could deduce that this place was far removed from any sort of town. Finally, whenever they went out to buy food or other supplies, they would always take a car. This fact caused him some dismay, because he knew that the method he learned at school of running around blindly while shouting for help wouldn't work here. He paused his little mental escape scenario there. His ultimate goal was to find somebody who would help him. If somebody who fit that description wasn't close by, his chances of escaping suddenly grew slim. A desperate far-off land deep in the mountains. A place where you couldn't even go shopping without using a car. In this situation, escaping would be very difficult. He grew depressed, and after a little while, he returned to his original scenario. Imagining becoming a hero like in the manga he read and beating down his captors became his respite. However, as he played those illusions out in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape. And then he thought of a way. If his goal was far away, then all he had to do was get closer. His goal in a nutshell was to find somebody who would help him. In other words, somebody other than his captors. If he faked being sick, then his captors would have to take him to the hospital or bring a doctor to him. They would probably be reluctant to do that, but he already knew that the hostage was more important than anything. In the off chance that something happened, like him dying occurred, they wouldn't be able to threaten anybody anymore. Luckily, he had an experience that would make him fake a serious illness. At the end of last year, he was inadvertently involved in a car accident and had to undergo surgery. The scar from that surgery was still clearly visible on his lower torso. He recalled the pain and suffering from that time. The existence of that experience would make a huge impact on the realism of his performance. He was quite confident in his ability to fake an illness. His captors at first took this as a sign he needed to use the washroom. Untying his arms, they tried to bring him there when he was still blindfolded, but he didn't try to get up. His hands, now free, only clutched I can't talk today, at his abdomen as he writhed in agony. He still had his earplugs in, so he had to pretend he didn't hear his captors asking the question. He was about to nod, so he hurriedly had to stop himself. His captors looked down on his suffering form for a bit. One of them proposed a course of action, while another laid his doubts that Toshiki might be faking it.
そいつ耳を塞いでるから聞こえてないぜ。
参ったんな。腹痛に効く薬なんかあらんね。薬局行って買ってくるか。
腹痛って言ったっていろんな薬があるだろう。症状がわからないうちはいい加減な薬は買えないぜ。
腹を押さえてるし、便秘やん。便秘薬でも買ってくれば収まるやんね。間違って飲んでも死なんしな。
決めつけるなよ。盲腸とかかもしれないだろう。
That's true. Appendicitis mostly affects younger like young kids to early teens. So
俺のおじさんがさ、昔急になったことあったよ。
mostly it can affect all adults as well, but it's mostly younger kids.
あれはかなりビビったぜ。
One of the captors leaned over beside the boy who was bent over in agony.
かわいそうにな。全身汗だらけじゃないかよ。腹か？痛むのか？おいおい、痛むんならあんまり抑え込んじゃかえって悪いぞ。
Realizing that his captors were concerned about his stomach, he inadvertently let his shirt right up, letting the scar from the surgery come into plain view. His vision was still obscured with packing tape, so he couldn't see their reaction to his scar. But his captors were taken aback, and judging from their momentary silence, he had obtained the reaction he was looking for.
おい、やばいぜ。この手術跡、そんなに昔のものじゃないぜ。
その小僧、熱出てるんかいね。体温計あるん？
あるわけねえよ。でもすごい汗だぜ。おでこは結構熱いと思う。緊張状態が続くとさ、昔の傷なんかに応えたりするって聞いたことあるぜ。
じゃあどうすんよ。薬じゃ治らんちゅんてんか？
何の手術跡か知らねえけど、とにかくまずいだろ。下手すると命に関わるぜ。
まずいんて。これは本当にまずいんて。
医者に見せた方がいい。このままじゃ突然ぽっくりいっちまう可能性だってあるだろう。
Toshiki Inukai, with those few words, knew that the situation was progressing exactly as he had envisioned it, and snickering to himself on the inside, pressed his act even further. He He didn't even need to see to know that his captors were panicked and were running around like chickens with their heads cut off at this troublesome turn of events. What a smart kid. Like, he's only like, what, like 10 or something? Irie sensei. One of the captors hurriedly left in the car. Another of the men, completely shaken up at this point, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. It looked like they were bringing a doctor. As long as the doctor wasn't an accomplice, the doctor was his goal. He was someone he should seek help from. His captors were probably wary of that happening. They would be prepared for it. This would all come down to luck. Some of the sweat emerging from his brow was from that nervousness. He just has to create a opportunity. That moment, the packing tape that was covering his eyes and ears was torn off. The burning light that he was seeing for the first time in several days hurt his eyes. After that, the gag that made it hard for him to breathe was also removed. Doctor was coming, the doctor was coming. Now how was he going to ask for help, and how was he going to get away from his captors? A plethora of thoughts began swirling through his mind. Hoshiki Inuke nodded while feigning pain and obedience. His expectations and the enemy's expectations. Whether they doubted he was faking his illness or not, they knew what his goal was and would try to stop it. His stomach contracted from the stress of this gambit, making it seem like his stomach really was starting to hurt. No, it really was. But there was no reason to panic. If he failed with his approach to the doctor, there was nothing to lose. If there was something to lose, it was his method of faking illness to get in touch with a doctor. He could think of other methods from here on out, it wasn't much. But at the present, this was the easiest and most dramatic way he could think of. The more he thought about it, the more it looked like this was his first and last gambit. Eventually he heard the sound of a car approaching once again. The sound of the car doors being hurriedly opened and shut. The sounds of several footsteps approaching. Irie-sensei! A young man in a white medical coat. As he acknowledged the boy, a suspicious look showed itself on his face. Captors didn't respond. From the looks of it, the young doctor had realized that this was an abnormal situation. One of the captors talked threateningly. For a while, the doctor and the captor silently glared at one another. However, unable to stand the sight of the boy continuing to suffer, the doctor, as the captors had hoped, didn't press any further.
その古い手術跡というのが何の手術でしたか？
そりゃわからないです。
本当は診療所に連れ帰るべきなんですがね。
先生、そりゃさすがにちょっと。
The doctor said he wanted to bring the boy back to the clinic, but the captors simply silently shook their heads at the notion. It was a fleeting hope, but it was only natural that the captors would refuse. At that moment, his eyes met with the doctor's. Seeing that the boy's painful stare was abnormal, the doctor suspected it was a serious illness. You're gonna make me rage again? God damn it. Listen. I fucking spent all day yesterday fucking setting up all this shit for you guys. Like, I spent hours, fucking hours, setting up all these stupid consoles connecting to my computer so I can play games for you guys. Are you satisfied with yourselves? Are you fucking satisfied? Because if not, I'm just gonna reach across the computer screen and slap all y'all in the face. Because it took me for fucking ever, okay? Goddamn. I'm done. Hours! All fucking day it took me! Like, it took me probably 12 hours yesterday to set up all this shit. Listen. 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 The more you complain, the more the rage is going to increase, okay? Okay, I'm done. Unlucky. Not really unlucky, I just had to fiddle with everything to get it to work. Seeing that the boy's painful state was abnormal, the doctor suspected it was a serious illness.
大丈夫ですか？私は医者です。この手術跡はいつ頃のものですか？
去年の冬に事故で。
事故？そうですか。参ったな。
He couldn't let the doctor figure out what he was faking it here. He had to somehow figure out a way to keep this going and tell the doctor that he was being confined and needed help.
患部を少し触りますよ。
Well, the doctor, well, Satoko, like, is not, like, being hurt by her, like, uncle here, but he obviously worries for kids like that because of Satoko, so, in her situation. So I think he's going to be more apt to helping the kid than a lot of other people. So it's probably good luck for him that he got Irie.
痛むところがあったら言ってくださいね。
You should clean up your area then, man. Seeing that it was extremely painful, the doctor crosses his arms and began to ponder. He had to somehow get himself to a hospital. To Toshiki Inukai, faking this illness was the performance of a lifetime. Yeah, you should clean that up, man. If only so you don't trip over them.
皆さんもご苦労さんなことです。お暑いでしょうが、せいぜい頑張ってくださいよ。不法投棄のダンプが現れたらすぐにご連絡ください。急行いたしますのでね。
ご協力感謝しますよ、大石さん。
Oh, that's fair. But even then, like, unless you've, like, rinsed them all out thoroughly, they're gonna be, like, stinking in a few days.
どうぞ。
A gap wide enough for a single car was opened up in the barricade. Oishi, showing his gratitude or perhaps a threatening attitude with a short beep on the horn, rolled the car forward through the checkpoint. This time, my appearance was the very embodiment of the word suspicious. A baseball cap, mask, and sunglasses. On top of that, even though I was sweltering, I was wearing a hoodie. Any respectable police officer would be loath to not stop me for questioning. I had meant to be overcautious, knowing full well that my face was known. But it might have already been too late for that to have any use. Using that as an excuse, I doffed the unbearably hot hoodie and windbreaker, ripped off the mask and hat, and threw them in the seat behind me.
ありゃ、いいんですか？
こんな小細工したところでどうせ割れているでしょうから。
そりゃまあそうでしょうな。
Orishi, probably thinking that my unexpected behavior was funny, continued to laugh. The beautiful and pristine scenery of Hinamizawa spread out before me. The village itself would have been quite beautiful if it weren't for the complicated circumstances surrounding it at the moment. I would absolutely love to take Yukie here for a drive one day. Oh, no problem. Good luck with whatever you have to do today. Talk to you later. Come to think of it, I didn't get the chance to call her last night. I played around with the idea in my head, but in reality this village wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I had heard everything at the prefectural headquarters. At the heart of this village, the intelligence network that the three families wielded was, due to blood ties and regional relationships, unbelievably well organized. Their net spread not just around Hinamizawa itself, but encapsulated the entirety of the city of Shishibone as well. When I first heard that, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I didn't take it completely seriously. How could a local organization out in the boonies here have something so grandiose? I couldn't deny that somewhere in the back of my mind I had ridiculed the thought. But not only were they really threatening the minister, but they had demonstrated that they had a complete grasp on our movements, which were supposed to be top secret. They were almost like the secret police that controlled a small Eastern European country like in some spy novel. The villagers here wouldn't bat an eye at getting their hands dirty if it meant fighting the dam project. I also heard something like that at the prefectural headquarters. Now that you mention it, when I first arrived here, Oishi also said that this place was a war zone, didn't he? The residents of this village were at the same time freedom fighters, although by definition they were no different than guerrillas or a militia. They weren't protected by the Geneva Convention, but they also didn't have to adhere to those rules either. This place was more of a quagmire than any legitimate battlefield. A secret war was unfolding. A secret war, not just a war, a secret war. I could drive along because Oishi was with me. But if I was to leave this car for even something as trivial as looking for a vending machine, there was a chance I wouldn't return. Even though a single shot hadn't been fired, this was a battlefield. No, the reason why bullets weren't flying was simply because it was hard for a civilian to obtain a gun in Japan. That's very true. Japan takes its safety very, very seriously. So they were probably just equipped with weapons other than guns that were easier to obtain. That was why Oishi was wearing the stab-proof vest, wasn't it?
赤坂さん、緊張してます。
The fact that I was apprehensive was, of course, picked up on by Oishi. If he had already figured it out, there was no point in trying to deny or hide it.
もちろんです。敵の本拠地に
Who the fuck
たった
would
2
it
人で乗り
be?
込んでいるんですよ。
Yeah!
この人数では万一の時が不安です。
万一の時な大丈夫ですよ。
この村の人間すべてが敵ではありませんでしたか。全員が口裏を合わせればこの村で白昼堂々殺人が起こっても証拠一つ残らない、そういうところだと聞いていますよ。
This is what the ironclad rule of not barging into a Yakuza office alone was about. There wasn't a neutral party involved, this area wasn't bound by the laws of common sense. If something happened, you wouldn't be able to prove it, and there wasn't anybody who would take your side. It was pretty much the definition of poking the bear. Don't poke the bear.
万一の時は無線機もありますし、赤坂さんが怖がってるほどね、そう簡単には完全犯罪はできませんよ。まあ、もちろん油断をしないに越したことはありませんがね。赤坂さん、緊張しすぎですよ。前にご一緒してた時の方がリラックスしてらしたじゃないですか。な
Laughing it off, Oishi thumped his chest and grinned, as if to say I could depend on him.
まあ、本当の本当にヤバくなったら桜の大門にはこいつがありますからね。
Oishi made a motion by sticking out his index finger. It was undoubtedly the image of a gun.
役に立ちますか。
撃った後の後始末云々が怖くなければ実に心強いですよ。
An officer's gun was only for show. If you really wanted to fire it, there were quite a number of stipulations, and you had to prepare for the long probationary period afterwards. That definitely wasn't worth it, so even if an officer did unholster his gun, there wasn't one who would actually wanted to pull the trigger.
赤坂さんは持ってるんですか？これ。
まあ、一応。
撃ったことは？
ありますよ。訓練でですかね。
そりゃそうでしょうな。
なら大石さんにはあるんですか。
私ですか。なまさかあるわけないじゃないですか。
What was this? I thought he was laughing at me because he had experience. The two of us laughed together.
銃口を向けたこともありませんがね。銃口を向けられたことなら何度かありますよ。銃口を覗かされるだけで。 寿命が3年は縮むな。
Even if he had never fired a gun before, you couldn't even begin to compare the amount of experience Oishi had over me. At a time like this, I could only marvel again at how reliable Oishi seemed. Until you screw him over.
そういえば日の高いうちにこっちには来たくなかったな。 でも車道はここを抜ける以外にないし。赤坂さん、念のためもう一回マスクで顔を隠してください。
どうしたんです？
冷房がうるさいから聞こえないかな。切りますよ。窓を開けてみてください。
When I opened the window, a blast of hot air blew inside, and then I could hear angry yelling coming from far away. At that moment, the forest gave way on either side of us, and our view expanded suddenly. And there could be seen the Hinamizawa Dam construction grounds. The very front of Hinamizawa Village. Oh. The crackling blare of someone's voice sounded over an enormous loudspeaker. The roar of angry voices continued to rumble. The incredible volume had become a veritable sound cannon spewing out its ammunition. The prefabricated site office was surrounded by 2 sets of high fences laced with barbed wire. Lined up in front of those fences were riot police and their vehicles. Surrounding all of it were villagers. They held out their protests against the dam as a single entity.
今日は少ないですね。ついてます。
少ないんですか？
ええ、多い時だと道路までいっぱいになりますよ。うちうち車も通れません。
At first, due to their overwhelming intensity, it looked to me like there was more people than there actually was, but upon closer inspection, there were at most 50 to 70 of them. But the 6 or 7 propaganda trucks lined up at that looked like to be on to a band of thugs were a strange enough sight. The villagers were also wearing helmets and bandanas, as well as covering their faces with masks, adding to the oddity of it all. Propagandist trucks, after braying their chorus, had their volume turned up even higher and began to flood this area with sutras. To say that the noise was downright violent wouldn't be an understatement. From this distance it was still loud. The glass in the office was probably rattling from the noise.
あれをガンガンやられるとたまんないんですよね。昨日の連中全員耳栓してて、それでも耳がおかしくなるそうです。気の毒な話です。
騒音規制でなんとかできないんですか？
うちの県には騒音規制に関する規定ね、ないんですよ。それにほら、お経でしょ。宗教活動規制できないし、連中も頭いいんです。
Yeah, there's like laws against like religious stuff, is what I think, Oishi said. Actually, no matter how tightly the window was shut, the booming sound of the sutras still filled the car. I couldn't even hear what Oishi, who was sitting right next to me, was saying. As the car approached the line of propaganda trucks, the blare became difficult to bear. It wasn't enough to just plug my ears with my fingers. I had to hold my head to keep my skull from splitting apart. If I had seen this terrifying energy sooner, I would have probably understood what Hinamizawa Village was much quicker. Now I knew. They wouldn't blink an eye at sacrificing themselves in order to protect their hometown. So goddamn noisy. Shut up, shut up, shut up. My head throbbed and felt like it was going to split apart. My eardrums crackled, and on top of it all, I felt like I was going to throw up. With the road crowded with the throng of squatters, the propaganda trucks, and the riot police's vehicles, it was in no way easy to get by. Even if you tried to shoot the squatters with the car horn, they were also wearing earplugs. Oblivious to noises from the outside world, it wouldn't easily move. The car could only inch forward at a snail's pace. Even then, the car eventually got through, starting to leave the tumultuous noise behind. I think that's correct.
ほら、昨日一緒に麻雀やったメンツにお年寄りさんいたでしょ。
Hi, hi, Middle Mantis. Thank you so much for the redeem.
覚えてます？
I remember that there was an older person who didn't exactly mince words. The guy that Oishi called Old Man.
いらっしゃいましたね。
彼ね、第一航空の現場監督さんなんですよ。 あそこのプレハブの中でイライラしながら仕事をなさってるんでしょうね。お気の毒なことです。
あれが毎日ではたまったものではないでしょう。
耐えかねてやめちゃう人が後を絶ちません。
I'm doing okay. How are you doing today?
まあ、その度にお給金がアップしてるんで、なんとも言えませんが。
Even having to deal with all that noise and hostility, they still made a wage that Oishi found enviable. That's good. I'm glad you're doing okay.
こいつら。聞こえてるのか聞こえてないのか。
A group of squatters were in the way of the car. Oishi, sufficiently annoyed, laid into the horn, but there was no indication that they were moving anytime soon. In this din, could they not even hear a car horn? Or did they hear it and were being malicious? If there were any riot police nearby, they would have probably made a move. But it just so happened there weren't any around here. It just so happens. I don't believe that for a second, that it just so happens. Oishi opened up the door. The hot air and even more heated roar of the crowd spilled into the car. Oishi said something as he grinned widely, but I couldn't hear what it was. He was getting them to move. Something like that. Oishi stepped out of the car and closed the door. The din faded slightly. I stared blankly at Oishi as Oishi headed towards the group and started some sort of conversation. Maybe we'd find the minister's grandson at Takatsudo. At the very least, I wanted to find him there. Find him and slip the cursed bonds of this incomprehensible village. I could only pray. At that moment, a shadow was suddenly cast over me. Somebody was standing right outside the passenger side window, blocking the sunlight. I spun around, looked up, and realized who the backlit figure was. Rika! Nippah! It was a girl. It was Rika Furude. The girl stared down at me with a bored look in her eyes. I didn't have any justification for it, but I felt like I had been found by somebody I shouldn't be found by. To fill the silence, I raised my hand as I mouthed a meek greeting. Of course, there was no way she heard my small voice in this clamor. But even then, she should have seen me wave my hand in greeting. In spite of that, she simply stared down at me with a cold look on her face. At that moment, the noise and heat spread throughout the car once again. Oishi had returned to the driver's seat. Taking a look, the group that were blocking the road had started to move aside while glaring our way.
お待たせしました。行きましょうか。
Oishi registered the figure of the girl behind me. One of the villagers came over and picked her up. In a manner of it's dangerous, so get away. It was then that she whispered one or two words, however, I couldn't hear any of it.
さて、行きましょうかね。
What was she doing there?
飛ばしますよ。もちろん、法定速度遵守で。
That's not what you call gunning it, but okay. As if to shake off the still audible angry voices, Oishi floored the gas. Along with the roar and the din of the shouting, the villagers and the girl quickly disappeared behind us.
この先を抜けると高津戸地区です。銃撃戦の覚悟は大丈夫ですか？安全装置外すの土壇場でとちらないでくださいよ。
Rishi laughed mockingly again. I was more concerned with what the girl had said, however, as I was vaguely bothered by it. What was she trying to say with that apathetic and candid expression?
今から緊張したって仕方ないですよ。むしろ収穫がなくて勇み足って可能性だって十分にあるんですから。
But there was no longer a way to confirm what the girl had tried to tell me. It might have been that girl who warned me to go back to Tokyo again, or else was saying to me who was here now, ignoring that warning.
警告したのに、バカなやつ。
I had the feeling she said something like that. She probably did. You fucking idiot. What the hell are you still doing here? I have a feeling Akasaka's not gonna make it. If you were to call Hinamizawa a rather lonely village, then Takatsudo was outright desolate. For your everyday city boy like me, I just couldn't understand why nobody would force themselves to live here. There were signs that people had, but they were all covered in dust or enveloped in ivy, indicating that it was all abandoned.
こんなところにも人は住んでいたんですね。
まあ昔の話でしょうな。こんな偏僻なとこじゃ年寄りには辛いですし、若者だってもう少しまともな土地に住みたいでしょうしね。後を継ぐ者がいなきゃ最後にはこうなるってことでしょうな。
If I had no personal attachment to the village, seeing the disused buildings made me feel a little sentimental. It seemed that Oishi also felt the same way.
こんなところで財布が発見されたんですか？財布の取得者もよくこんなに偏僻なところに通りかかったものですね。
ああ、村人には山の中に畑を持ってる連中がいましてね。そういう連中は朝晩ここを通りますから。
畑仕事の村人たちは早朝や夕方にここを徒歩で通ると。
まさか行けるところまでは車で行くでしょうな。
早朝や夕方にこんなところを走行して落ちているたった一つの財布を発見できます？
できたんでしょうな。
Yeah, that seems oddly suspicious to me.
取得者はどこで取得したと言っていますか？
もう少し先を行ったところにある茂みです。取得者はたまたまお腹が痛くなってちょいと茂みで用を足そうと思ったらしい。それで偶然見つけたらしいんですよ。
I don't...
中にちり紙でも入ってるのを期待したんですかね。
Who has toilet paper in their fucking wallet? Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's too
財布発
convenient.
見の当初からそういう違和感が拭えません。
Someone had to have placed that there. They wanted them to find it. Like, that's too convenient. I expressed the feeling that I had from the start of the day quite frankly. It seemed too good to be true, but it was unwavering proof. But it was too perfect, sickeningly so. That was my feeling.
できすぎってのは案外当たってるかもしれませんよ。
というと、
実は四課のお友達からちょいと聞いたんですがね、園崎お涼が大臣の孫の誘拐事件について言及したって話なんです。
言及した？
大臣の孫ももう誘拐されてから何日にもなってかわいそうだ。そろそろ解放されるといいなと。そう、お涼のばあさんが縁側でぼそりとつぶやいたってな話らしいんです。で、そのぼそりが園崎家の裏の裏のあちこちに伝えられてるようです。
Right, I had heard something earlier from Sato-san, the informant. And when the leader Oreo had a concern, somebody in the family would be considerate.
つまりそれは実質上の人質解放命令ですか？
私はそう見てます。この出来すぎの財布発見は孫を警察に引き渡すためのイベントじゃないかと。
どうして人質の解放を？
そりゃ人質を解放するなんて理由は一つしかないじゃないですか。
何です？
取引の成立ですよ。ひなみ沢ダム計画の中止を大臣が約束ってことですかね。
ダム計画なんて必ずなくなっちゃいますのです。
At that moment, those words that the girl had said resurfaced in the back of my mind. In the end, it was turning out exactly as she had proclaimed. The young girl knew the circumstances. She knew everything about this kidnapping incident from the beginning to the end.
赤坂?
The girl unexpectedly called my name.
なんだい？
東京へ帰れ。
Huh?
あなたはもう幾ばくもしないうちに、それがあまりにもみすぼらしくて気の毒な姿だから、今のうちから警告してあげているのです。
どうして私が後悔することになる？
いちいちうるさいな。あなたの親はあなたが赤信号の横断歩道の真ん中にいるとき、どうして危ないのかを全部説明し終えるまであなたの手を引っ張らないの？ 引っ張るでしょ。まず歩道まで連れ戻してから、つまりはそういうこと。
The girl who knew that everything from start to finish had warned me in the beginning. Go back to Tokyo.
赤坂の怖がり。
孫は無事見つかるでしょうが、その後はいろいろと厄介な問題になるでしょうな。どう厄介になるかは一警察官の私には想像もつきませんがね。
フルデリカって少女、ご存知ですか？
What I had said was such a non sequitur that Oishi sat in stunned silence for a while.
もちろん知ってますよ。御三家の一つ、フルデ家の一人娘ですね。
どういう少女なんです？
おやおや？
おや？
これは意外な人物名にちょっと驚きです。公安ではフルデ家が臭いと睨んでおられるわけで、私にも情報を分けてくださいよ。
いや、そういうのじゃないんです。ちょっと気になったもので。
まあいいや。同じ卓を囲んだ友人の質問なら答えないわけにはいきませんからね。
友人と呼んでいただけて光栄です。
で、あのお嬢ちゃんはね、まあ村のマスコットみたいなもんです。村中の誰からも愛されてます。中でも年寄り連中には特に崇められてましてね。
崇められる？
よくは知らないんですがね、フルデ家に生まれた女の子ってのには多少神聖な意味合いがあるらしいんですよ。ひなみ沢の土着信仰ですがね。
Sorry, I'm looking things at my rewards. Okay, fair enough.
お社様の生まれ変わりだとかなんとか。
She is a god.
らしいですよ。
お社様。そういえば、同盟の登り旗の中にお社様と書かれたものがあったような気がします。何ですか？お社様って。
That's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out.
なあ、ひなみ沢の守り神様の名前です。村にあだなす者に罰を当てるって信じられてましてね。まあ、そんな便利な神様がいたらダムの連中はとっくに神罰にやられているんでしょうが、幸い今日までその罰ってやつは一つも起こってませんがね。
Oh, they will be.
村にあだなす大臣の孫がお社様の怒りに触れ、なんて言いましたっけ？そう、鬼隠し、大臣の孫を鬼隠しにしたと、そういう筋書きになるわけでしょうか？
なるほどな。そういうことになるんでしょうな。
お社様が下した神罰なら、犯人はお社様の生まれ変わりであるあの少女。
Even I didn't know exactly what I was saying. The fact that Oishi laughed it off was a bit of a relief. Oishi's joyous laughter was so infectious that I began to laugh like an idiot as well.
ありゃ、こりゃ珍しい。
Oishi, after laying into the horn several times, rolled the window down and leaned out, waving his arm in an exaggerated manner. It was a car headed the opposite way. Until now, we hadn't run into any other cars except our own. And of all the places, it was at this desolate location. It seemed that Oishi knew the owner of that car. Is it Irie? The other car also chirped its horn and came to a stop. It is! Hello!
こんにちは。
The other car's window rolled down slowly, revealing a young man in a white overcoat. He was about my age, or perhaps a bit older. But you really can't judge someone based on their appearance.
大石さんじゃありませんか。 こんにちは。珍しいところでお会いしますね。
そりゃこっちのセリフですよ、先生。まさかこんなところで会うとはね。どうしたんです？
いえね、ちょっとした往診です。
ありゃ、そうですか。休館とかでしたか？
いえ、そんなに大したことではありませんでした。よかったですよ。
お医者の世話にならずに済むならそれに越したことはないです。
ではこれで急いで戻らないとスタッフに怒られますんで。
な診療所長さんも大変です。ではでは、お気をつけて。
A young doctor named Irie, after gesturing his farewell, drove forwards and soon disappeared around a corner. Oishi also drove forwards, but soon came to a stop again. He pulled out a worn map book from the dash. His expression didn't have an ounce of irreverence, but he was serious. He was perfectly serious.
どうしたんです？
今日は診療所は往診の日じゃないはずです。よっぽどの休館か特殊な事情のある患者ということになりますね。
Oishi flipped through the pages, opening up the map of Takatsuro. After that, he took a look around and started to figure out what our current location was.
その休館が怪しいということですか？
言ったでしょう、高津戸地区にね。今私たちがいる道はここ。入江先生はこの道に対して。
Having no sense of our surroundings, I couldn't digest anything about the place he was indicating on the map.
私たちは財布の取得場所を目指しています。ちなみに取得場所はここ。でもね、高津戸地区にわずかにある民家に向かうにはそもそも道が違うんです。
つまり入江医師は民家のない方角から来たと。
山間の段々畑で農作業中に誰かが倒れたってのでない限りね、人が倒れて医者が呼ばれたら普通は連れ帰って詳しく調べるもんです。でもさっき理恵医師は大したことはなかったと言いましたね。車には他には誰も乗っていなかったようですし。
Oishi didn't say any more than that. I also said nothing more. That doctor just now examined a patient, close by. Only that. The noisy radio had suddenly gone quiet. The sky had just as suddenly turned an oppressive color. As Oishi mused that it might start to rain, a torrential downpour started, as though trying not to disappoint him. Eventually Oishi stopped the car. The only sounds to break the silence were the percussion of the rain on the roof and the soft squeak of the windshield wipers.
ちょいと静かで行きましょうかね。
Saying that in a quiet voice, he exited the car without an umbrella, careful not to make any noise. Oishi leaned over, indicating the other side of the thicket. He was pointing over to a prefabricated shed and a car that was parked beside it. The car looked obviously well cared for. It wasn't a vehicle that had been left there for several years.
あの小屋は
営林署の機材小屋です。夏場以外は利用されてないと聞きました。
あの車は営林署の職員の。
さあね、公用車には見えないですね。
Richu was playing it cool, but my nervousness was gradually increasing.
一応は念のため。
Saying that, Oishi returned to the car. I thought he was going to get an umbrella, but he had grabbed the onboard radio instead.
もしもし、大石です。聞こえてるかな？こんにちは、こんにちは。
はい、沖宮 PS。大石さん、感度良好です。どうぞ。
今、高津戸地区の営林署機材小屋前です。矢後地に向かう方じゃないよ。南沢から高津戸に入る方の。
はい、確認しました。
小屋に不審者。これより職質します。5分で連絡なかったら駐在所に連絡と大至急応援パトを送ってください。よろしくお願いします。
了解しました。
じゃあ行ってみましょうかね。
5 minutes is very short. Since he was first confined here, he had heard the sound of a car multiple times. So he just thought that the far-off sound was more of the same. However, the reaction from his captors was, until now, something he hadn't seen before. They jumped, reacting as if shocked by a jolt of electricity, and pressed against the window, cautiously peering outside.
止まったな。
営林署の人間、まずいぜ。
いや、警察やんな。
One of the captors lifted the boy by his collar and pressed a blade against his cheek.
お兄ちゃん、ちょい静かにしててな。分かってると思うけど、大声出したりすると大変なことになるからな。
Toshiki Inukai was sure that the doctor had reported things to the police. He had felt relief when he thought that he was saved, but not imagining that his captors would resort to violence when they were cornered, his anxiety remained unabated.
どうする？
時間稼いでる。小僧連れてちょい裏から抜けな。ほとぼり冷めたら打ち合おう。
One of the perpetrators grabbed the boy by the collar and forced him to stand. Of course, Toshiki Inukai tried to resist by feigning that his illness had been aggravated by this rough treatment, but his captors paid no heed. The door was violently banged upon.
ごめんください。こんにちは。
The door was banged on again. Toshiki Inukai hesitated for a moment to respond to that voice by yelling. However, while he was being indecisive, his mouth was covered, taking that option away from him. The leader of the captors waved at the other to go. The younger perpetrator nodded in response, and while keeping the boy's mouth covered, started headed towards the back door.
はいはい。何かご用かいね。
どうも、警察ですがね。ここちょっと開けてもらっていいですか。急な雨で困っちゃいましてね。
ええ、今開けます。
The moment the lock was undone, Oishi forced the door open. And with a gleam of menace in his eyes, he pushed the man aside as he stepped into the room. Then in the small and empty room, he was able to quickly discern that the boy he was looking for was nowhere to be seen.
あれ？私はここは営林署の機材倉庫だって聞いてたんですけどね。何にもありませんね。
There was nothing inside the room that would indicate this was an equipment shed. There was only a mountain of blankets indicating that somebody was sleeping here, alongside empty food packets strewn about.
ああ、ここはずいぶん前から空っぽさね。機材がしまってあるところなんて見たこともね
えわ。でも営林署の建物でしょ。あんた営林署の人？
あんたこそ誰よ？警察？
The two of them glared at each other suspiciously. Both Oishi and the man steadfastly refused to reveal their identity before the other did. The man, judging from the sharp look in Oishi's eyes, realized that it would be hard to talk his way out of this one. No matter what he said, the most time he could buy would probably be only a few dozen seconds. Only the sound of rain filled this tense moment. Oh. Just then they heard the sound of a struggle from far off. Oishi had a hunch. There was no doubt that Akasaka, who was circling around back, had run into the perpetrators who were trying to slip away. As Oishi thought that, the man in front of him reacted a moment faster. The man swung with an attack that was more intended to obscure Oishi's vision rather than actually hit him in the face. Seizing his opportunity, the man aimed a kick at Oishi's groin without any hesitation, but he had missed his mark and was unable to land a critical blow. The man, trying to pin Oishi, grabbed him by the base of his neck with both hands and fiercely tried to push him down. But, as Oishi fell backwards, as if kicking the man upward, he dug his foot into the man's midsection. With that leg acting as a fulcrum, the man was flung by the falling Oishi as if by a circle throw. The two of them squared off into the pouring rain.
面白いじゃないの。俺とやろうってか？ね。
Oishi, as if trying to cheer himself on, grinned smugly. He then stood up while brushing the mud off himself. Even though he countered the assault, Oishi was getting up rather awkwardly compared to the man who he threw, who swiftly sprang to his feet. Akasaka's voice rang out from the distance. Judging from the distress in his voice, he was already engaged in a fight and wanted Oishi to reconvene with him. But Oishi's hands were full as well.
Akasaka-san! 申し訳ない! ちょっと待っててくださいよ!
The man raised both fists into a stance that hinted at him being acquainted with karate or some other form of martial art. Of course, Oishi, as an officer of the law, was decently versed in judo. He also had the moxie to have been through this fair share of fights before. Because of that, he could tell that the man in front of him was quite a bit better than fighting than he was. Damn it. Thinking that this was going to be easy just because the order came from the Sonozaki family to release the hostage had been a huge mistake.
なかなか上等じゃないのよ。久々に胃液がこみ上げてくる感じがしますよ。
Oishi played off the situation like it was no sweat. His opponent, seeing his attitude, took that to mean that Oishi wasn't going to go down easily. The man wildly charged forward, attempting to grab Oishi. If the man managed a successful clinch from his lower stance, Oishi would be tackled to the ground and end up being mounted. It was something you saw often when children fought, but it really was a bad position since she couldn't do much once you were in it. Oishi responded to that move, also lowering his stance to collide with the man head-on. The moment they clashed, Oishi grabbed the man's lapel. As he yanked the lapel upwards, he smashed into the man's solar plexus with the elbow of the same arm. Oof! It was a move from Oishi's own personal brand of brawling judo. That's gonna knock the air right out of you. He then grabbed on with his free hand and attempted to throw his opponent with both hands, but the man lowered his center of gravity and swung his arms in a large arc, entwining them with Oishi's. Not only that, but he had forced both of Oishi's elbows to the outside, and Oishi, now in an awkward position, was in danger of exposing his back with his hands still clutching the man's chest. This guy practiced Aikido or grappling, didn't he? Oishi, cursing the fact that his fingers were twisted into the man's shirt and couldn't get away, released his grip. But he was still in the same awkward position of being bent over. And to top it all off, at zero range, the man was able to read Oishi's movements completely as he tried to squirm his way into a better position. And then took the palm of his hands and swiftly clapped them over both of Oishi's ears.
Nuts!
Clapping ears in any other martial art form except for self-defense was basically forbidden. Karate and Judo didn't recognize it as a legal technique. It was that much of a simple and dangerous attack. Oishi raised both his hands as he tried to reflexively clutch at his own ears. But before that could happen, the man wrapped his arms around Oishi's neck. His thick biceps clenched firmly around the base of Oishi's neck like a vise. Oishi instinctively thought he was going to be killed. After all, it wasn't hard to believe that a man like this, who was accustomed to fighting, could crush his opponent's neck from this position. But Oishi's a strong, independent boy. But his opponent didn't do that. He had chosen to keep his hold and force Oishi to lose consciousness. That's why Oishi, at the moment, even though his face was twitching, was grinning wildly. Even though his opponent had a chance to kill him, he didn't choose to. He was thinking, this guy had no intention of killing me. However, even though that might be the case, the man's hold on his neck was by no means gentle. In no time at all, Oishi's consciousness began to fade. Having the experience of being taken down countless times in judo during his student days, Oishi was utterly resigned to the fact that it was over. Oh, he's just gonna let himself fall unconscious. Okay. Akasaka was finally recovering from the intense pain of being kicked in a rather sensitive area. He had bumped into the captor carrying the boy by the back entrance. He had seen Toshiki Inukai's picture plenty of times, wasn't able to immediately ascertain if the boy in front of him was the real deal, with his mouth covered in packing tape. Also, with his limited experience, it was hard for him to panic over how to deal with the situation. Of course, the perpetrator didn't overlook this momentary lapse. His kick landed squarely in a critical spot, with Akasaka not even having time to call for help. As the man flung the boy over his shoulder, he headed towards the front of the shed. But upon hearing Oishi's bellowing voice, he gave up on going that direction. He then dashed off towards the forest, as if the weight of the boy slung over his shoulder wasn't even there. Akasaka was lost for a moment. Meeting up with Oishi, who was fighting with the enemy, was by far the safer option. But he couldn't just lose sight of the fleeing man. Akasaka stood up and chased after the captor's back. He ran through a short thicket, branches and fallen leaves crunching underfoot. The tips of branches raked and clawed at him, small scratches inscribing themselves on his body one after another. He kept on stepping into puddles and mud, and his shoes were soon filled with murky water. For Akasaka, traveling through unexplored forest was, even though this was an emergency situation, extremely unpleasant. As he said that, he regretted it immediately, as it was but a waste of breath. There wasn't a thief in the world that would politely stop when told by the police. To a city boy like Akasaka, running through the forest was an arduous task. However, it must have been no easy task either for the man carrying the minister's grandson. He neither gained nor lost ground in his pursuit. Akasaka, upon realizing that, gained back a bit of composure. Just keep on chasing him. We are running in the same conditions. In fact, the man running with an awkward stride was at a far more disadvantage. They couldn't run forever. Eventually, he'd definitely trip and fall. As long as he was being hounded, he would definitely stumble. Wasn't there 3 guys, though? And soon his wish was fulfilled. The man who had stepped into something had lost his balance, was no longer able to wear the weight of the boy, dropping him. Akasaka, in all honesty, didn't care about the perpetrator at all, just as long as he could ensure the safety of Toshiki Inukai. So if the perpetrator ran off by himself, it was perfectly acceptable. But it seemed that Toshiki Inukai was important to the man as well, and didn't choose to just run away empty-handed. Akasaka didn't know what to do in this kind of situation. His first priority should probably be to ensure the safety of the boy, subduing his captor being less important. Grappling with the perpetrator wasn't something he planned on. Most likely, it was either do or die. Akasaka's moment of indecision proved to be fatal. The man aiming right between, or rather for both of Akasaka's eyes, struck out with a jab. Not wanting that, Akasaka raised both of his hands to shield his face. At that moment, the man kicked at his unguarded midsection. The pain almost felt like his vital organs were being squeezed out of his body, but he latched onto his opponent's leg. But his opponent didn't hesitate one bit. Leading with his seized foot, the man jumped at Akasaka, applying pressure and pushing him down. Akasaka was unable to withstand that and fell, but under no circumstances was he letting that leg go. The 2 men fell together in a tangled heap. The man was desperate to pull his leg free from Akasaka, but having fallen in an awkward position, was unable to. 2 of them rolled around the ground, floundering about trying to gain an advantage. But Akasaka, who was holding onto his opponent's knee with both hands, and that opponent, who had complete freedom to move his upper body, were in 2 completely different situations. The man gained a positional advantage on Akasaka, who was still latched onto his leg and couldn't move away, and pounded full force on his head with both his fists. Not only that, he found a rock nearby and beat it against Akasaka's skull. Ouch! Ouch! The difference between being hit with a fist and being hit with a rock was vast. Akasaka quickly thought of letting go of the man's leg to free his hands to protect his head, but if he let go there, the man would get away. If he didn't dig in here, eventually, everything would be for naught. The boy he was trying to save was right here. He was going to save him and go back to Tokyo. If he could do that, then it was goodbye to this freakish village. Ouch. Without looking, I could tell my forehead had split open and was gushing blood. But I didn't let go of the man's leg. How could I? I won't let go. When the man realized that no matter how much he beat my head, he wasn't getting away, he used both of his hands to grab my throat as if to crush my windpipe. I pulled my head back as a slight form of resistance, but it was of no use. The man's hands enveloped my neck and began to crush it like a vise. It was less about the pain of not being able to breathe so much as it was choking so hard I felt like I was going to throw up. I felt like my stomach was going to turn itself inside out, but I could only endure it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. My throat hurts. I won't let go. I can't let go. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to resolve this and go back to Tokyo. Go back to Tokyo and talk to Yukie all about our unborn child. We were going to talk about our bright future. I had no intention of loosening my grip. However, it loosened just a bit and the man's leg came free. The man kicked as hard as possible and I tumbled backwards. My head was spinning and I was unable to get up right away. I couldn't even put any strength into getting up in the first place. Even so, I couldn't back down. If I let him escape now, this chance would never come again. Even just catching their scent was nothing short of a miracle. If we weren't able to get the minister's grandson back here, there wouldn't be another chance. The man tried to drag the boy to his feet, but the kid was displaying some unexpected resistance, allowing me to get up unnoticed. I grasped the rock the man had just beat me with over the head with. Now it's my turn. The rock should be able to supplement what meager strength I had left, adding more than enough power to my attack. My fist, still wrapped around the rock, dug into the side of the man's torso. Seems like I hurt him quite a bit. The man rolled around for a bit, clutching his side. Freed from the man's grip, the boy hid behind me. To the boy, those were the words he was waiting for the most. But the crisis was still not over. That was because even though he was still clutching at his side, the man had gotten up again and had taken a fighting stance. I could see in the man's eyes the resentment at the pain I had caused him, and the confidence that he could still beat me. If we were to clash head-on again, he might not even stop if my head were split open. The man reacted adversely to the words reinforcement. That was because he knew now that arguing like this wasn't just a waste of time, but put him closer and closer to danger. Realizing that the man shifted mental gears almost too quickly. When the man pulled from his back pockets was, of all things, a gun. Of course, I'm a police officer. It's not like I don't know what a gun is. But having one pointed at me was something I'd never experienced before. Was it real? Of course it was. There's no way it'd be a replica in a situation like this. As long as he still held that gun, no matter how much I yelled at him, I was at a distinct disadvantage. But I still had a fighting chance. If I were in his shoes, instead of wasting time yelling at each other like this, I would shoot him and take the boy. That was the fastest and would suppress any sort of further resistance from him. But the man was demanding my surrender without having fired a shot, meaning that he either didn't want to shoot or couldn't. In other words, the man in front of me was soft. If I could buy even just a little more time, the factors that would lead to my victory were numerous. Oishi was probably on his way, and the reinforcements we called for before coming here should already be on their way too. Not only that, they should have contacted the local police box. Without a doubt, somebody stationed in the village would be here much quicker than that. At that moment, I heard the rustling of foliage and heavy footsteps approaching. Luigi was coming here was a whole new ballgame. The man couldn't have more than one gun. It's not Oishi. I had thought the time was on my side, but I had failed to even imagine that the enemy could also have reinforcements. You could tell the man who had disappeared was one of the perpetrators just by looking at him. The boy, sensitive to the impending danger, curled up behind my back. How could this be? Damn it. As I backed up against a large tree while still protecting the boy, the second man also pulled out a gun. Oh, shit. As I shouted in protest, blood erupted from my left shoulder. It took a few moments to register that I had been shot. Compared to the ones from in movies and TV dramas, the first actual gunshot I heard was simple and mundane. In fact, the sound was more akin to the small fireworks I used to buy from the corner store as a kid. But there was no comparing the pain. It was a fear you only knew after you'd been shot. The boy, in his confusion, tugged at my clothes, agitating the wound even further. I wanted to put on a bold face and reassure him, but my voice was hoarse and had the opposite effect.
大丈夫。すでに応援は要請してあるんだ。すぐに警官隊が駆けつけてくれる。
This is not gonna end well.
警官が来る前に、お前ん額にもパツクレちゃる方が早いんだ。無駄な摂取をすなっちゅう、本家に言われとんか加減しとん。あんまりなめとんと、容赦せんとよ。
This was bad. It was very, very bad. The second man was on a complete different beast than the first. He had no signs of indecisiveness or mercy. If this man said he'd shoot, he'd shoot. He wasn't somebody that a man like me could buy time from. I really hated to admit it, but at that moment the image of Yukie's smiling face crossed the back of my mind. I knew what that meant. I was warning myself to not throw my life away over a matter of pride. Of course I didn't want to die here. I was just starting a new life with Yukie, and I wanted to see the face of our soon-to-be born child. Oh, excuse me. Why should I risk my life for some minister's grandson when I was at such a critical juncture in my own life? Damn it, damn it. I need to stop rambling on myself. So what do I do now? Give up the boy and extend my own life? What a good idea. Everybody's life is precious. My own life was in danger. Nobody would blame me. It hurts, it hurts. If I had known it would be this painful, I wouldn't have played the tough guy. My biggest miscalculation, though, was that the sound of the gunshot was far quieter than I had imagined. If it was only that loud, it would be drowned out by the rain in the forest. It wasn't something that somebody far away could hear.
待てよ、待ってくれよ。死にたくないよ。
あん、こっちだって死なせとうない。分かればええん、分かれば。
撃つなよ。撃つなよ。帰りを待ってる妻がいるんだ。死にたくないんだよ。
叫ばんとでも歌んね。おとなしゅう頭抱えてうつ伏せになったら歌んだるね。
本当だろうな。本当だろうな。約束は守れよ。絶対だぞ。男と男の約束だぞ。
守ったんだ。男と男の約束しやよ。
守れよ、守れよ。じゃあうつ伏せになるからな。なるからな。約束守るんだから銃を向けるのやめろよ。やっぱ撃つ気なんだろ。撃つ気なんだろ。俺が撃つつになったら後頭部を撃つ気なんだろ。
歌んね、歌んね。わーった。しまってる。銃はしまってる。男と男の約束しやねえ。どんなこれなら文句ないんて。
ねえ、
There he is! The cavalry has arrived. It was over in a flash. The moment he lowered his gun, Oishi didn't let his chance slip by. Oishi had been assessing the situation for quite some time from behind the two men, but since they had their guns trained on me, he didn't really have a chance to jump in. Seeing the look on Oishi's face indicating that he wanted me to create an opening, I took on that role completely. Oishi forcefully lifted the arm that was holding the gun. He then took the gun from the man's hand in only an instant. Good job, man! The other man, who was a bit slow in grasping what was happening, pointed his gun at them, but was with his ally grappling with Oishi, he couldn't pull the trigger. If that man was the one that was wrestling with Oishi at the moment, he might have shot without hesitation. But this man wouldn't shoot. He couldn't shoot. Oishi kicked the other man away, and while aiming the stolen gun with his left hand, pulled out his own. With guns akimbo, he was aiming at both men at the same time. I'm gonna start using that instead of guns blazing. Guns akimbo here. It was perfectly played, but heedless of the guns pointed at them, the men shouted "Scram!" as they scattered away at full speed. It was over in an instant. Those two running away without putting up a fight was honestly unexpected. Oishi, quietly clicking his tongue in admonishment, slipped both guns into his pants pockets.
あいつらもよく知ってるな。
何をですか。
逃げてる背中を警官は撃てませんからね。私も退職金が惜しいもんで。
Oishi and I grinned at each other.
君が犬飼俊樹君？犬飼検察大臣のお孫さん？
はい。
これはでかい事件になるかな。どうせトカゲの尻尾切りになるんでしょうけどね。
Uishi smiled amusedly. The fact that the Onikafuchi Guardians, or rather the Sonizaki family behind them, was pulling the strings was apparent, but proving it wouldn't be easy. And with the apologies to Uishi, the incident was unlikely to go public. If this caused an uproar, it would obviously lead to the minister losing his office. With HQ having decided that doing so was in the national interest, this would probably be cleaned up quietly. It might be a rough way of saying it, but this was born in the shadows and was going to die in the shadows. Uishi probably already understood the implications behind this incident.
とにかく非常線を張らせましょう。連中まだ一丁は拳銃を持ってるようですからね。それから犬飼君を保護して赤坂さんはすぐに病院に行かないと。
As the tension of the situation faded, the pain from the gunshot wound in my shoulder blossomed once again. My forehead was also stinging painfully and had grown hot enough to start a fire. Thinking that the tension had caused me to sweat, I wiped my forehead, but what came off was a large amount of blood. I realized that my shirt had been stained bright crimson from the blood flowing from my head. Yeah, he definitely needs a doctor. I turned around. The boy was safe and sound. Without a doubt. There would probably be an investigation on the men who ran, but that was for another day. At this point in time, I could safely say we had cleared the major hurdle of securing the boy's safety. As soon as I recognized that, it felt like the lights in my head had been hit by a power failure. Rip. My knees buckled from underneath me, the ground there feeling as soft as a cloud. It didn't feel unpleasant, even if I was covered in the rain-soaked mud. Uishi came closer, asking if I was okay, but somehow I couldn't tell. I turned off the switch to the last light in my head. He gone. The exhaustion enveloped me. Sleep. Something softer than any blanket wrapped around me. Oh. So that's gonna be the end of the chapter, isn't it? God damn it. God damn it, what happened to him? God damn it, okay. A very kind person. Patients admitted to the hospital can only accept calls at fixed times. That's why she wouldn't be receiving a call from him today. Yesterday she had teased him that he got lonely easily, so he might have struggled with the idea of calling her sooner. That was much easier to imagine rather than that he might just be too busy to call. But he's just that type of person. Yukie whispered that, smiled to herself. The announcement that visiting hours were over played over the hospital intercom along with some music. She exchanged pleasantries with the family of the patient that was staying in the same roof as her. Probably eager for his mother to be discharged, their small child was wearing a beaming smile. The child's mother was pregnant in the bed next to mine with what may be their new brother or sister. They were probably ready to burst with the expectations, dreams, and worries of having a new sibling. Joys of a growing family. Bathing in those warm feelings, I stroked my own belly, which had grown quite large. I had talked with him about how many children we wanted to have. We talked about how if we had 3, it would certainly be lively. However, there was the inescapable worry of whether I would be able to handle giving birth that many times. Yukie, smiling as she said that to herself, gently stroked her stomach. Metropolitan Public Safety Division, the place where that man's sense of justice had led him. The person was actually a very gentle, very fragile person. He didn't talk much about the specifics, but I didn't think he was suited for the assignment he was on right now. But as long as he said he was going to try his best, I would watch over him warmly. Yukie seemed to be enjoying herself as she talked to her own belly. At that moment, Yukie suddenly concerned about something and looked out her window. It used to be this time, long ago. She remembered that when she was little, around this time in the countryside where her grandmother lived, the Higurashi would fill the air with their chorus. This was the middle of Tokyo. Unlike in the countryside, you couldn't hear the song of the Higurashi. But for some reason, at that moment, Yuke felt she wanted to hear that song. Interesting. Very, very interesting. End of chapter 4. Wait, really? Are we only on chapter 4? It feels like we're so much longer than that. Okay. So, I will leave it there today. I will be starting with chapter 5, I guess, next week. Oh, let's see. Ooh, that sounds like fun. We're going to be rating, Fluffy Jana today. They are playing, Red Dead Redemption 2. So, go check her out. I will be back with Higurashi next week, so I hope to see everyone there, and thanks everybody for coming to stream, and I will see you all next time. Bye!